order on this 15th day of December 2022. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman.
Here.
Councilwoman McNamara. Here. Councilman Martell.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present.
Okay, everybody is here. So we're starting today's agenda with a wetlands restoration grant in Riverside discussion, and we'll be joined by a number of people who I don't think are here yet, though I see Joyce Nowak is here from the Peconic Estuary Program. We're just waiting on Janice. Oh, Janice is here too. Janice is here. Our town planning and development administrator is here. I was looking straight ahead and didn't see you. Perfect. So we can get started. You're just working on the technology.
Maybe it's not on. Howard? Janice, maybe the TV's not on. Right.
Yeah, here's Charles. Here we go. Thank you, Charles.
Charles to the rescue. Yep, there we go. Yeah. Low tech.
Tech support here.
I'm challenged all the time by it.
Aha. Got one.
Charles. Got two.
Well, you be there. That's fine. And I'll.
That's okay.
Don't start.
I can do this slides if you want.
Sure. I just,
It's just
how do
over
you,
there, right?
from the,
There we go.
and now just as long as it comes out.
Looking good. All right. Take it away, Janice.
Oh, thank you. Come sit with me here. Yes, good morning, Mr. Supervisor, board members. I'm joined by Joyce Novak from the Peconic Estuary Program this morning. And we're just gonna go through a very exciting grant possibility that we've been discussing for Riverside.
Okay.
As you know, we have Riverside, we're planning our sewage treatment facility, and we acquired what's known as the Shumeda property up on the north side, which I'm sorry to bring a map.
There's one, if you just want to go to the third
Advance
slide.
it.
To the next one.
There you go, there. And that was what we had, so part of that is owned just CPF proper, and part of that is now owned with water quality.
Okay.
And we had hoped to do initially an outfall pipe from the STP to there and do a constructed wetland. We may have a better alternative, more cost-effective, that came out of our value engineering study done with EFC, but we have an exciting prospect that we can still do what we set out to do with the, we wanted to, as part of that idea, restore the dredged material area with a constructed wetland, and so that's what Joyce is here to talk about, with some dollars in hand. So I'll turn it to you.
All right.
Okay.
I like this.
A different, we're not asking, we're
not asking for
receiving
money.
in the Christmas spirit
Should we
we're
go back to
getting.
the beginning of the
Yeah, I just have three
that's
slides to sort of guide us a little bit. If you could just
Next
go
one?
back
The first
one.
one.
Huh? The next one?
You can go
Back-
just back
backwards.
one
Go
is fine.
backwards one.
So I think everybody's aware at this time that the estuary programs around the nation received about $1 million a year for 5 years from the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we are in year 2 of planning for that money. One of the things we'd like to do is focus on Peconic East and Peconic West sites so we can target that money on the ground in a cost-effective way. The Peconic East site, I'll just briefly say, we're looking at a Shelter Island, North Haven, Sag Harbor area that will really be a climate adaptation and eelgrass recovery area with, of course, water quality improvements. And on the Peconic West side, it's going to span the river in Flanders Bay and include the recent Land Trust Broad Cove acquisition area in Riverhead, and the Riverside area that's long been targeted by the town of Southampton. Both of these areas are environmental justice areas. If you'd like to go to the last slide, please.
Both the areas
sorry, just that, yep.
in the west.
Correct, the western areas, and some parts of Sag Harbor, actually, under the New York State maps.
Okay, good.
But looking at the western sites now. And so this, of course, is a federal priority, environmental justice areas. We are obligated to Justice 40, which is 40% of the benefit of these funds has to go towards environmental justice areas. So 100% of this.
Describe what makes something environmental justice.
So that's an excellent question. For us, that will be aligning with New York State's delineated maps. They have a series of proposed environmental justice areas right now that are under review, so they're not finalized.
Is it because the people living in there fall below a certain income? Is that?
So they look at a series of 4 things. New York State does. Every state does this a little bit differently. It's largely based on census data, which is not always ideal, but the best tool that we have. And it looks at income. It looks at things like language, communities that speak English as a first language or a second language. It takes, New York State takes race into account. And there is a 4th item that New York State looks at, but they outline their criteria. We're going to fall in line with what our state does. That's the easiest thing to do, and we are putting some money towards supporting households that are under HUD definitions, supporting Suffolk County's septic improvement plan for the low, middle income and middle income households to allow them to continue to pay for maintenance on installed systems. So currently, the county program brings you 3 years. We're going to hopefully support people years 4 and 5 in maintenance of newly installed systems. So
And
that's
we've just been working on adopting something on the IA systems exactly along those lines,
Mhm.
so it's very compatible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so we're hoping to get this, that'll all be the same year as these funds that I'm talking about with Janice today. That will hit the ground. Money is actually in our bank account for once in the federal lifetime. They are ahead of the game. So all we have to do is submit the paperwork at this point, and we can start to get that money out to the town. So for this area was of particular interest to us because we're also looking to increase water access in these communities. That will be one of the pillars of our internal equity plan. So this is an area that, which came out of your Riverside redevelopment plan that really wants increased access to the water. So with this first installment of $100,000, we're going to look to get a concept plan in this area. Anytime we deal with wetland restorations with dredged materials, it's complicated. We saw this across the river when the county did their Indian Island project. So we're hoping that A, we can learn from the county's experience, and B, that we can use this opportunity to really dig in with a consultant to see the best way forward. It is our intention as a program to then put more funds to this in possibly year 4 or 5 of this money, so that this doesn't end with a concept plan, but with an engineering design and actual implementation. And of course, we will work with you, for any additional grant. I mean, this is a prime project for New York State bond funding. So we're really hoping that if we can get a concept design completed in the next 12 to 18 months, that this site will be in really good shape to access state bond money.
When you say not access the money, but access the water wetland restoration project, so are you envisioning some sort of park back there?
Well, the Riverside planning effort includes a maritime trail, and as you know, we're trying to connect the entire river walk, from like the corner where, like over by McDonald's and the trustee ramp in that location at Peconic Avenue,
crossover.
all the way. And then we've been talking to Long Island Science Center about how they can accomplish it. Then we have our parkland that the county owns that we have working on an intermunicipal agreement to get that and some kayak launches, and then any private, we've got a couple of blips there. You've got a mobile home park in the sort of there, but we would
And a
have,
marina.
you also just recently purchased access at the road, at Flanders Road.
To this property?
To this property, so that could be included, so, you really could piece together, you can have a, save the, except for the mobile home sort of that's kind of interrupting it, you have a really nice possibility for,
So with the
public access to the river there.
The $100,000 is for the designing of something,
It's for a concept plan.
right? But
So-
then would you guys also be looking to fund the development of the plan, or you'd be looking?
We would. So we're hoping that we'd be able to fund the concept plan, fully fund an engineering, design, and permitting phase, and then partially fund. I mean, it's going to be an expensive venture, but at least be able to give funding that can serve as match money. The thing that is extremely unique about these funds is that there is no match requirement on our part. So they're not obligated as match to anything else. So these funds can then be used to leverage more funds to see the implementation of this through.
Now, will any of this interfere with our development of a sewage treatment project for this area?
So right now in our seeker that we're about to, do the supplemental side of our seeker review, because we've got all the pieces to the puzzle, and this was a piece initially that we thought we would
Yeah,
do
we
the
spent
pipe.
a lot of money because this was going to be the outfall area.
Outfall, and that is still listed as an alternative in the plan, but it's not the preferred alternative. The preferred alternative is to keep everything contained at the enterprise zone site,
If we had issues
the
with
leaching
Pine
galleys.
Barrens and-
We do have to go through a process with the Pine Barrens, potentially a hardship waiver for clearing. And so
So-
it's sort of like and this is why Riverside has always fallen behind, because of these regulatory, it's right in the middle of like the Pine Barrens, the tidal wetlands, there's all these regulatory issues here. But we've been talking to the DEC, they would prefer this not to be the outfall and to do the constructed wetland. We're talking about doing it more on the regular CPF side, and then once
I
we
know,
know
but-
about the
so-
water quality
so-
side, if that doesn't, so I think it could be a two-phase concept plan,
Well, I would
where the
hate to
one,
waste the money designing something and engineering something and find out that if we actually did that project, it would interfere with my.
it would not interfere.
won't.
So there's two parcels that are happening here. Where that arrow is a parcel that's already owned by CPF that has nothing to do with the outfall. So that you can
That's
do a
open
concept
space.
plan, it's open space, we can create some access and constructed
That
wetland
we
there.
could do the construction.
And we were never looking to put the outfall there. So that is that. Then when we go through this supplemental secret process, we will, it's identified as an alternative, but it's not the preferred alternative. We really do have a better shot at keeping it all contained. It's more cost effective.
Right.
Over the long run, it's a better option.
But until we
And
know
then we
what to
can
do.
sort of piece together that second part of the concept plan or mirror it, you know what I mean? So that we have the one, which is great, and then we can mirror it on the other. That's the thinking there. So, and then, create the whole.
Okay.
And not for nothing, it's not our money, so,
Well, ultimately, there might be.
later, but first you need to know.
First and
what-
foremost, if we're getting, in like sort of a free concept plan from Connecuh Estuary program for a property that we never intended to use for the outfall pipe and is a purchase for open space, and we are creating access and an environmental benefit for wetland restoration,
Can I
and
ask
that's
just
like
another
win-win.
question? I don't know when the last time this area got dredged, but I have to believe that the disturbance on this site is dredge spoils.
Yes, it
So-
is.
It is.
Where are the dredge spoils going the next time it gets dredged?
Not there.
So that's what a concept plan will help to work out. So what they wound up doing at Indian Island, because it has become too cost prohibitive to move spoil off-site, it really has. Once you start testing and doing those core samples, there's just a truckload of things that nobody wants to deal with, and they most likely would have to make their way to New Jersey. Very expensive to do that. So what they wound up doing at Indian Island was concentrating them in one area of the site and designing sort of an upland area that was still planted and will be recreation, but taken out of the wetland area and just made a sort of a perimeter on the same site. So there is potential to sort of mimic that idea, that it becomes
That there
here,
be an area.
that there be an area of more upland buffer area, which we can also build into a climate adaptation project, right? If it's gonna be a buffered inland area, to look at different things that you can do with that.
You know, can we put dredge spoils
No,
on
you can't.
CPF
You
projects?
can't put dredge spoil there no matter what. That's an old thing from like when there was like, if you look at those indents in the river area, there used to be like barges that were parked there. And that's where all that dredge material came from. If you look at like old pictures, we came to find this out when we were doing the work on the Riverside Maritime Park. So there's no way you're putting dredge material, A, on CPF land, B, now it's a federal designated estuary. If the county or whoever were to dredge in that location, they would likely put it on a barge and move it out.
Gotta make it very expensive.
It
Yeah.
it probably was the channel as well in
The
other
channel,
areas.
true.
I mean, it seemed like the place where the dredge spoil would go.
Right.
In other words, it wasn't just from Southampton town.
That's right, and that's not, an appropriate place for new
But,
dredge
but they
material.
bear that cost because that's their requirement to do that, and they have to de-water it and all the rest of that.
In the
so,
future.
Yeah.
When you bought this, it's not for dredge material. I mean, maybe on the water quality piece in the end, but we're talking about the open space piece right now. I don't know how that's gonna play out, the water quality.
We'll
So-
see, I don't see any other areas that they'll be able to put dredge spoils, so. I guess we can cross that bridge when we get there.
Is there a possibility that environmental bond monies from New York State with the recent referendum can be used for this particular project, wetland restoration?
That's my hope.
Okay.
So New York State has classified wetland restoration as a bondable infrastructure for both climate resiliency, and water quality. So my hope is that if we can get a plan in place, we can move forward with helping the town to try and access that money directly. The $100,000, PEP has no desire to micromanage the money. We want to just pass it over to Janice to run the RFP, to
Yeah, we would get a consultant. we
do
would
all
have
of
a
that. We
company
don't want to
it.
do that externally for you. That doesn't make
So you
sense.
just wanna know if we'll take your money?
Okay.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what we would like
Yes.
to know, yes.
And we will need some kind of resolution accepting that grant award.
Right.
And so this is why we're here.
Oh, that's fine with me. So we're not obligated to do a project.
No?
Right now, we're just designing.
Yes.
Correct, it's a concept plan. And if it turns out that, and this is what, a concept plan usually brings to the top, that there are complications that might make this something that is not a full wetland restoration, maybe it's a partial wetland restoration. We are very interested in connecting to the Maritime Trail where we can and creating water access for the community. And we'd really like to do that
So we own a
as well.
bunch of land just, toward the circle there. And maybe adding to it shortly. The county owns some. We have been talking about doing a park there, waterfront park, and lately talking about, using some CPF funds to build out the trails and boardwalks and things like that catwalks along the water thing, that type of thing. So it's pretty exciting and maybe this can connect somehow. Could be a trail that leads to this property as well.
Yeah, I think there's so much potential in this area for, responsible water access and really getting some of these communities more connected. I think especially in light with the plans, the larger plans in the entire area that are sort of evolving, I think it would be smart to have a concept in place that works hand in hand as development increases in the area before we see what happened across the river and Riverhead and everything's bulkheaded and parking lot, right, which we
Right.
want to try and avoid.
Right,
So,
this could be an incredible park to
right,
serve the whole region. You look across the water and you'd see the development on the Riverhead side, but our side of the river would be very natural. So.
But you'd also be able, one of the big things is be able to access over the riverhead side. And that's, I think, critical for going forward. that makes a big difference. It's something that the community's been asking for.
Oh, for a pedestrian bridge across, that's a possibility
Yeah.
at some point too.
Yeah, they were always saying it's a bridge to nowhere, but once you have
Once
all
you
this
have it there,
amenities,
right.
it's a
Right.
bridge to somewhere. And also the aquarium has always been talking about some kind of little boat shuttle thing that goes across, maybe and access on the other side, so that's
Right.
another option. So I think,
It's
there's
cheaper
a
than-
It's
lot
kind
of
of a
synergy.
win-win in my view.
It is, and I know we've been talking to the Long Island Science Center too, who was due to purchase the acreage just east of McDonald's.
They are.
Right? I don't know if it
That's a
went
change,
through.
yeah.
I talked to them about 6 weeks ago, and they
I hope
had,
so.
had grand plans to do that. And they've come to us and asked us to partner on an education facility there,
Right,
where they would like to barge people across to their main center
okay.
in Riverhead Town as well. So I think there's going to be increased connectivity, and,
Well, that's pretty close already to the bridge, but it still.
right,
It'd be fun.
Still would be fun.
yeah.
And, they're looking to us to acquire a conservation easement over a large section of the properties they're acquiring, which we'll be discussing at some point.
Yeah, so there's a lot of synergy, there's a lot of good environmental benefit here. And we're like, so Riverside has, potential plans for the STP and new density, but this whole side is the environmental side, the offset. So that was how the whole thing was sort of negotiated, where we were, you're redeveloping, but you're also preserving and restoring. So it's a win-win.
It's an interesting parcel. The land along the water and on that peninsula is actually higher in elevation than the lands closer to Flanders Road. I'm thinking that's because of the dredge spoil that has been placed there over the years, but,
Yeah, that makes sense.
we'll see when,
Right.
That's
When
a
this goes
fish
through,
passage
yeah.
site too, right? Into Wildwood?
The fish passage site is
Does it go up
further
that
up
far?
the river a
Like
little bit.
Grangeville, right?
Yeah,
it goes through the river there.
they go up the
Going-
pass at Grangeville and then
Then
into Wildwood that way.
so we're not interrupting anything in that respect.
No. I mean, if anything, a restored wetland there, you can
It's better.
see how bad it is, will be an overall wildlife benefit.
When you say restored wetland, so you'd be removing some material or pushing it aside to allow water into that area? So
Right,
now it's
so-
elevated?
Yeah, we'd be altering the hydrology back to what it was, to be a wetland, and a healthy wetland. There's channeled
So you have to
areas.
remove material or at least push it over,
So, right,
create some berms.
correct. So what that looks like in the end is what will be hashed out with a concept plan. And, the way we want this set up is so that the town guides that, right?
But you'll be helping us write that RFP, right?
Yes.
Count on.
Yeah, we
count
can
on-
write, we've written the RFPs for the county for years.
Yeah.
And so we'll go through language that we have for that.
So historically, that was a wetland there?
Yes, that whole area was
And
wetland.
it was filled in with dredge swell?
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
And it would be cool, that piece that we just bought on Flanders Road that could access this, and I think there's, correct me if I'm wrong, Janice, there's a barn of some sort on that property. They were talking about doing a pass-through, just as like a trail through that barn out to the wetlands.
I think that's a
Oh,
different
that's on
piece.
the,
Where's that?
where the, that's further down in Flanders. This is more Riverside, but yes.
Because it would be cool to have something of that nature where you could walk in and you could see, large photographs of the wetland restoration and the process it went through
Yeah.
with information on how it happened.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, and it's
We
a
could
great
absolutely put that
idea
in
to
there.
use this as an
education
outreach and education site too, to see what's possible. Wetland restoration itself and wetlands as coastal resiliency, and the benefit that brings. You also have in this area, what we call potential for wetland migration. So, if the site is regraded down so that the wetland becomes healthy, there's area upland of that for that wetland to continue to migrate as sea level rises, and that is so rare on the east end.
It's also possibly to reach out to Ducks Unlimited, because I know they do a lot of wetland restoration, and there's a very large black duck population in that area that they actually do studies on. So,
That's great. I didn't know that, and we work with them in Orient on another site that was prioritized for black ducks.
Yeah, and they're actually doing studies in that area, so.
That is good to know. We can definitely loop them in. We'll work with the town to put together stakeholders,
Okay.
so that everybody's aware.
Yeah, because you may have a jurisdictional issue. too.
There's always a jurisdiction.
Right, well, I mean, within the town of Southampton.
Okay.
That hopefully.
Yeah, I think, well, when it
think
comes to
it's- I
environmental
think it's
restoration and
constructive.
regenerative projects, everyone sort of comes together.
together,
So I
yeah.
think that we have that on our side.
Yeah.
And it's constructed, so I don't know anyone can actually claim jurisdiction over it.
Yeah.
That's a constructed site, so it's not natural.
Well, it's owned by the town now. It's CPF.
You're talking about the trustees?
Yeah.
There's no bay bottom there, and it's owned by the town. So there's that.
Alright.
So you'll be seeing a resolution come your way to authorize acceptance of
acceptance
the
of the
grant,
money.
if you're amenable to that.
Everybody's okay with that?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay?
Sure.
Sounds good, thank you.
Perfect.
Someone
great.
wants to give us money, this is a rare.
Yeah, it is, the holiday time. so
Started.
this is a-
Merry
Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you
You
very
too.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce.
Katie was doing my other two more.
Okay, so we're gonna move
Katie's right in
on,
the hall.
we're gonna move on to the next topic, which is update discussion, housing for golf course employees. And Janice is gonna be again part of this, but also Katie Garvin will be part of this. And, I know we have some
Hi, it's me again.
other participants.
Yeah, I'm gonna
So-
be joined by Katie Garvin.
So, yeah, Janice, I do recall talking about this at one point about trying to create staff housing at golf courses.
Yeah, but we went back, we printed out maps, we looked at old plans, and
Two
we
copies, I emailed it to all
have
of
a
you, there's a
draft
copy
for
for
your
Christine
review
too.
to go over today.
And I remember some of the issues concerning neighbors and size of buildings and setbacks and number of staff units you could provide,
Copy for everybody too.
all of that. Other than that, it's been a while since we've talked about
Thank you,
this,
sir.
so we need a bit of a.
Yeah, we're gonna go back and give you a refresher, and then we'll discuss. Do you have one for me?
Yes. Yes, I get, are you ready for the golf course one too? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Katie.
Yes. Okay, so this is the draft that I circulated for you guys yesterday. I did try to look at my notes from the last time. This is gonna be impossible to address everything, right? Which is why I think for the most part, everybody's been going to the planning board for this, because it's really kind of driven by a site plan. But the main changes that Janice and I did, from the last work session, was we gave it its own definition. If you remember before, when we came over the summer, we were trying to fit it into the definition of like accessory buildings or structures, because that's sort of where we've had housing. That's where we have the ag labor housing, that's where we have housing for restaurant employees, that's where we kind of have bed and breakfast, that's where the ZBA had basically said the only avenue that we have for this kind of housing is in accessory buildings as accessory uses, and the town code prohibits cooking and sleeping. So what the first draft that we had gone over with you guys was to fix that definition to include this. And then after everybody's conversations, and when we were talking about affordable housing and how maybe these should be their own kind of categories, what Janice and I decided to do was just make it its own category, separate
Its own
from
definition, so it's
Yes.
not except ag housing, except this house, except golf course housing. We were like, instead of having a definition that accepts things and we keep accepting things, let's just put it as its own thing that you permit. So it's kind of the reverse.
Okay.
And that also kind of just then eliminates all of the questions about what's accessory and what's accessory to, because all of the current golf courses that we have in the town are either pre-existing, meaning they predated zoning altogether, or they came by special exception when it used to be a special exception, used to have a golf course and a country club and housing. So now we're just basically saying, if you have an 18-hole golf course in the town of Southampton, however you got here, you can have this living quarters for golf course employees. That's what we're proposing
And
to
then,
you right now.
and then these are the standards for that.
And the standards are pretty similar to what we had before. We kept the 150-foot setbacks from the rear and the side. We basically said for the front yard setbacks, I know that there was concern, from some of you, like, well, we don't want them to ruin the view sheds, or maybe we do want them closer to the highway, or we do want them closer. So what we said for the front yard setback is that your front yard setback for these structures, for these houses, for living quarters, can't be any less than what is required in the applicable zone. So if you wanted to, if you were just putting a house there, you'd have your setback, so that you can't be any less than that. And then we also built in a little discretion for the planning board, because all of these have to go to the planning board for special exception approval anyways. So we basically said, we're gonna let the planning board reduce these setbacks, and then you can see where that line is, it's B.
Or not reduce, but just apply them, and maybe, in the circumstances, sometimes it's better one way or another, and that gives them a little latitude to be able to shift things.
In certain cases,
In
right?
certain
So if
cases,
it's
so it
next
gives them a
open
little bit of-
space or golf
Right.
course uses, I see.
Yes.
Where's the front address? Is that the
It says,
street?
It's in B.
yeah.
It's in B, and where it says refer to street.
Well, it says shall be no less than the required principal building setback for the street for the applicable zone. Yeah, so it's distance from street for your, if you were just
Yeah.
building a house, you have a
That is your
distance.
front yard.
That's your front yard setback. So it's
But-
no
But-
closer than
I'm
anybody
looking
else
for
is
the word
allowed in the
front,
zone.
and that has
It's
its
the
own
principal.
designation. I understand what you're saying now. There could be a street on the side, but,
So it would be in the
okay.
front yard then, right?
But I will make
Right,
sure it's
there's-
consistent. I know what you're saying.
yeah,
Sometimes it
'cause
says
there's
front yard
designated
setback,
front and-
and sometimes it says distance from street.
Yes.
So I
But
will
if
make
you have
sure.
more than
that's a
one
good
street, you'd have more than one front yard setback. right?
Correct.
Did you take a look at how these apply to current golf courses?
Yes.
I think that's something we asked.
We did. We went to Claire Shea and looked at the actual setbacks, and they comply.
Did you
Okay.
look at proposed new golf courses?
We did look at what proposed new golf. Oh, you mean for the
For the hills?
it's already
Lewis Road.
approved at the setback for, it's already there, you know what I mean? So to shift it anywhere else didn't, we'll get to that later. Are you exempting things that have already been approved?
Well, and then,
that's
yeah,
another
and then
question.
I also, along those same lines is how we, each one is individual, they're discrete, they're different from the other one. So I want to really know how much latitude the planning board is allowed under this to make changes as required.
Well, it
when they come
says,
across
the
a
only
set of
part
unique
that gives them
factors.
latitude is in B, and it says, the planning board may approve reduced setbacks where the adjacent properties are not residentially zoned or are protected open space or golf course uses, meaning sometimes the properties, there's more than one tax map parcel, but adjacent to it is still the golf course. So there's the effective setback line, even though it's a separate parcel,
Right, but I think
doesn't
the
really
planning board
apply,
needs to be
because it's
able to-
still, to the casual observer, it's still all golf course.
Yeah.
So
but
that's what
in-
we're saying
in-
that.
In a unique set of circumstances, they may get locked into not being able to make a decision to alleviate a problem that may
Well, then
arise.
you go to the zoning board of appeals, if anything.
Well, the applicant might, but I mean, the planning board needs to, I think, have a lot of discretion. Not a lot, but enough to make sure that they can cross over between the different golf courses that have a unique set of circumstances.
It does say they may approve reduced setbacks where they're not, where, so in other words, if you're backed up to, some kind of commercial use, and that's where you wanna put the housing, let's say, you wanna push it away from anybody over here, and I'm putting it over there, and now, but, it's 35 feet and not 50 feet or something. They could do that, because they wanna put it there, and because that's the best place, given all the circumstances of the site. But if it's, you don't wanna push it over there, and that's where houses are gonna go, regular, single family. And so it says, not residentially zoned, meaning you can't do that when there's,
Unless it's.
housing is there.
Unless it's within the particular application itself. There may be housing involved with that as well.
This is discussing like the golf course employee. So a golf course is a golf course, and the only other thing it may have is some kind of, like clubhouse. And then when you're talking about putting these living quarters for employees, we're saying it has to be 150 feet from the front, the rear, the side, right? But in a circumstance where, there's two parcels, it's still all golf course. That's, the planning board may reduce that setback, because even though on a tax map, there's a line, in reality, there is no line, right? There's just two parcels that are still continuous golf course. And they could push it to a side and reduce the setback a little bit, if that made sense for them. If you don't want them to be able to do that, then it would not be there, and the applicant always has to just go to the ZBA.
And they wouldn't need a variance for that, they could
They
do that
wouldn't
at the
need a
planning
variance, the
board
planning
because
board
we're
can
writing it in.
manipulate the setbacks to put it in the right place overall.
Well,
That's the
and that's
idea.
what I was
Right, am I saying this
Yeah,
right?
but that, John, but that's exactly the balance, right? The balance is right now, assuming the town board wants these uses to be approved, which they have been routinely approved by the planning board, by the building department. Right now, it's just been going to the planning board, and they've been handling it, and for the most part, it's been without
It's
any kind of,
worked.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, when we initially came, we were like, we can just leave this with the planning board. We can just say that the use is permitted and leave it with the planning board and let the planning board handle it. But what we heard the last time was also like, maybe we do want some special exception standards that the planning board can't vary. That only the ZBA can vary with a hearing and the neighbors coming in. So we're trying to figure out, well, where do we think the planning board could vary it and without a variance? And these are kind of the standards that we thought would be more inflexible. Certainly, they can always come to the ZBA. Anybody can come to the ZBA. They come to the ZBA all the time to vary setbacks. So if there's a golf course that hates these and they have special circumstances, they can certainly come to the ZBA. But if you really want to have special exception standards, we kind of thought these were the most consistent, these were the ones we see the most. These setbacks were the ones that we just saw the planning board implement for the most part. They were close. The one, the Atlantic, which is how this came up, they're like 151 side yard setback and 148, so they're close. This is what the planning board seems to think is the most appropriate.
Right, so it gives you a little bit of latitude, but not a lot. Remember that special exception is not a guaranteed yes. It's that you have to meet the criteria in order to get there. And so there's general standards and then special standards, and these are those special standards. So,
Is there design standards here too, to make it fit in with the character of the other buildings at the golf course? or-
so we say it may be located in a separate detached building or attached, so long as the height doesn't exceed 32 feet, and then the square footage on E was not to exceed 7,000
It would be
square feet.
subject to ARB, I
Yes.
suspect.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would.
And the idea, so you're maxing out at 50 employees,
Yes,
right, under this law?
that was what we discussed last
And a
time.
7,000 square foot building, but you are allowing all 50 to be in the 7,000 square foot building? Or are we breaking it up, so?
You
That would
could
be as
say
we
that
proposed.
language in there and give that as the planning board may require.
Well, I'm just trying to, I know
Massing
that we
to
have
be
a
broken
code
up.
that has a certain density. It's based on New York State Building Code in terms of how many people can be per square foot of a building. I forget what it is, but I
That
would
would
say
still
50 square
apply.
feet a person or something, a bedroom area, something to that
We-
extent.
We didn't want a very large building of 30,000 square feet,
Right,
that
but
looks
now
like
you are
a,
building it, basically
barracks or
what's a
something.
seasonal building, I don't know if there's a seasonal requirement, but mostly it's gonna be seasonal workforce in its dormitory style building, which could be
It can be,
bunk
yeah.
beds and things like that, but it still has to comply with New York State Building Code. I'm just trying to think about the idea of one 7,000 square foot building with 50 people and where that would go in relationship to residences and whether that would be a problem. And
You could, it says the maximum for any one building is that, but it doesn't mean you're always gonna get that. I mean, somebody could just put a 2,500 square foot.
Well, it
or
says 50 people on the
15.
present,
Yeah,
on
or
the
you could
premise.
do
It
lots
could
of little
be-
ones.
There could already be housing
There,
with
and there is a lot of
20
housing
people in
already.
it.
I mean, if we
Yes.
maxed out, it's like 25 people per building, then you'd have to break it up. But if the buildings are right next to each other, what's the difference,
Right.
right?
Well,
You
that-
could
that's to
say
your
in the
point,
standard, the
effects.
planning board shall ensure the massing of the building and architectural style is
I
compatible.
mean,
You know,
it's
you
more
could-
expensive to build two separate buildings, but I'm just trying to think about neighbors and how it impacts them.
and there's no limit on the number of buildings, but the limit is 50 employees. So
Correct.
that would be the limiting
Yeah, that's the
factor
limiting
on that.
factor.
So they could have an attached structure, an
Yeah.
addition with 17 people, and then another
Yeah,
two
and
kind
that's
of
all,
in the
all
back,
those
40.
design things were what we talked about the last time, but it's hard to build in design standards in your code, I
But
mean,
you could
that's,
say something about massing, that to give the planning, they already do that anyway. It's one of their
Well, what
site
do
plan
you think?
standards.
Is that okay to put 50 people into one building?
I don't know that it's going to be 50
No.
people into one building. I
You
mean, they may
can't.
have
Well-
only 20 people.
But he's
We're
saying,
just
but
mixing
he's
it out
saying,
of
but he's saying it could be, so he's trying to prevent that scenario.
You know, 7,000 square feet is quite a big building.
It's like
It's a
100
huge building.
divided by 50 is.
I mean,
like
how big
100.
is, you know,
Well, but what it doesn't go into is the amenities for those.
It's like
buildings.
140 per person.
Amenities.
Yeah, I mean, are they, you know, are they cooking and, or are they, where are they getting food?
well, there
What's
could be, some of
happening?
these dormitories sort of could have like a little sort of cafeteria style situation, and then the,
But
you
this
know, the
doesn't
rooms.
preclude that,
No.
right?
It doesn't,
Okay.
you know, but it's
So
like
it could be-
condensed.
It's not just based
Facilities.
on the occupancy, it's also based on the amenities to support that occupancy,
Sure.
which can be a substantial
Yeah,
percentage.
I'm not
of-
sure it's a bad thing. I'm just trying to think
Mhm.
think it through. Yeah, another question on the 150-foot setback, that's to the building? So what if the entryway is facing the neighbors and then the parking is on that side, and suddenly it is sort of encroaching on the neighbors by putting the parking and the entryways on the side of the neighbors? Do we want to try to keep the roads and entrances to 150 feet, or would that be too onerous?
See, it's like putting numbers like that, I would just recommend putting language that says
Maybe
like the
screening.
massing and arrangement of buildings shall be situated so as to protect adjacent residential
Right.
uses.
But
May-
what,
You know,
Maybe,
something like
hold on,
that.
so maybe
And the planning
related
board would,
infrastructure, we could set it back 100 feet so that you could put parking there, but you still would be maintaining a significant setback, and we could require screening.
If that's what the board wants, you know, but I just, when you put 100 feet and then someone is 105 feet, you know what I mean, like it just, or like 95 feet, I should say, you know, like, we don't know that that's gonna work entirely, because we haven't sat there and measured every
Well, I'm
last
trying to
one.
avoid the situation where, although the building's 150 feet, the road going to that building is really close to the neighbors, and the parking is really close to the neighbors, and so we've solved one issue for neighbors by the building, which is an enclosed building anyway, but if a lot of activity is close to the neighbors, so,
You could say, like I'm
put-
saying, massing and arrangement is so situated to reduce
yeah, you
buffer
could leave it to
impacts
the
upon,
planning
and then
board.
let them,
Yeah.
once you put a
So-
hard and fast number, now you're
well,
in
that's,
another.
that's my
Right.
point. If you say a maximum of 50, if I was an owner, I would build for 50. But if I only had 30 employees, what happens to those unused units? And what's the potential that that could be used for other purposes besides employees? How is that restricted? How is that?
I would say that the planning board does a good job of, you know, we could add the provision to provide for a covenant if you want one. They could do that anyway, but I mean, they would say, here's our records, these are our number of employees. I mean, how could they would have to show something to the planning board
Well,
to say,
what I'm
here's our
saying is
number of
that in
employees. They're not gonna
2020
build to 50 if they only have 20 employees.
But what I'm saying is that if I was building something in 2022 today, I would anticipate that if I had the opportunity, I would want to build to the maximum amount of employees that I may not ever reach.
While that may be true, the history of
I
these,
don't
because
know.
the history of these, there is housing out there already. A lot of these golf courses have it. And just from looking at them, they come in for what they need, right? So even the most recent ones are like for 16 employees. Like the CO showed like
That's
10
Golf at Bridge
and then
did-
16.
Was it 20 or?
Yeah, it's very.
But whatever, you know, there, I don't know that there's a golf course out there that doesn't have housing, but let's
No,
say,
no,
let's
you
say
want
there
housing.
is.
Is
You
there
just
one that
want it
has
to
a
be-
building with 50 employees in it?
Not yet, no. I mean, I'm not sure, that's what I'm saying, like, I
That's
think,
why I'm saying it's not a, it's
Like most of these
probably
golf
not
courses already
realistic
have
number.
homes with like the superintendent living in it with,
yeah, they have some, but let's,
so that would count against their, so like.
Correct, that
Most of
counts
them will
towards their
never
50.
get to add on something for 50
For 50.
employees.
Once it's, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
They have to show that they actually employ the person. They can't be like, I'm building for 50, but I only have 20.
But
It's
if-
just not
and
how it
could
works.
could they go the other way as, in terms of numbers of people, like making a nice house for your superintendent, so he or she can have their family there? In other words, would this cover that kind of?
Like a two-bedroom cottage.
It's an an opportunity to attract employees or, good employees, a nice house. It's not a dorm, it's not, you're not with, but But
It
that
says
could
group
happen
or
as well. 'cause-
dormitory.
Yeah, we didn't.
We didn't account for single family, so we could
Okay,
add
so
that if
this-
you wanted to.
Well, I don't think we have to, but I mean, they could probably make a structure that is for a fewer amount of people with, I don't know, nicer amenities, we'll say. A kitchen,
Yeah.
living room,
It does say
Okay.
living quarters for golf course employees may be located in a separate detached building. That could be one house.
Mm-hmm.
So my gut instinct,
This'll,
Well, he needs more mic.
Janice, my,
thank you.
my instinct is that 50 people to a building is too high. It's just
Okay.
too many people, that we ought to put some limitation, whether it's 20 or 25 people in a single building. But I would like to hear from the golf courses, because I know some members are here. In terms of related structures, like picnic area, outdoor, picnic tables and things like that, and parking, I could see leaving that at the discretion of the planning board if there was some language that they would make an effort to minimize impacts to neighbors on related structures. You know,
Associated facilities and parking.
Yes, exactly.
Outdoor dining, music, that kind of thing.
So say
Yeah.
massing of buildings and associated
Yeah, 'cause
facilities
that's the
slash
issue. People are
parking
gonna be
shall be so
outside, they're
situated. to-
barbecuing, they're playing music, and it's gonna.
It is a golf course, so.
It is.
But-
I think that the contracts that the golf course, and they can speak to this themselves, but they have the rules of their own employees
Yeah,
are
they're-
very, very strict, as from what I
Yeah,
understand.
but we can't
Right,
depend on
but-
those rules.
Right, and I would think, their interests also, they want to be good neighbors, but they also want to protect those playing golf there and trying to push any, noises and smells away from the golfers, and you end up with this inherent conflict. So if there's some language in there,
Got it. So
That
I have
protects the
massing of
neighbors.
buildings and associated facilities slash parking shall be so situated to reduce any impacts to adjacent neighboring properties. Does that
Yes.
sound good?
or to reduce or minimize. Yeah.
Reduce slash minimize?
Yeah.
Before we hear from them, could you walk us through the reasoning why different zoning areas of the town, the special exemption was put in different zoning areas of the town? I see R40, R60, R80 and up.
We were really just trying to address the ones where there's already,
Oh, these are,
We
Yeah.
actually
Kind
looked
of
at the zoning of
Of all the
existing golf.
Existing
and
golf
then Wade
courses are
reminded me
here,
that
so-
we should add Southampton, which is in a highway business. So we missed one. But there,
That's not in the residential section anyway, that
but
would
I
be-
gotta
yeah.
get that code in there.
Yeah,
But it was really just where are they already? Because there are no golf courses. Like there should,
No,
there's nothing in the code that allows for a new golf course short of the way that it is most
Right.
recently proceeded as an accessory to the residential.
And besides, on the issue of how many people per building, and I'd like to hear from the board on this too, but there are other issues by having 50 people in one building. There's fire safety, egress, that type of issues. It's a little bit more difficult to manage 50 people sleeping in one structure. So I'd like to hear some thoughts as whether you guys think that we should limit in a particular building the number of individuals.
is there a limitation on the
I
square
do.
footage per an individual in a building like this?
I think it's like
For every
180.
employee?
There is,
I
it's in
think
the town code. I can
It's-
talk to Sean McDermott about it. There is something that says, I don't know what it is.
Well,
I don't
that's
wanna guess.
important here, because that would be the limiting
Yes.
factor. Doing the
we could
math
add a
would.
G and just reference back to whatever that is and say,
Okay.
no,
Well,
it
let's
shall
find out
not
what it-
exceed
yeah.
the
Not
occupancy
exceed.
standards of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But that's still,
Dormitory
you might
I
be
think
able to
there's a
meet
state,
that.
overriding state law about
Yes.
that.
You might be able to meet the state law and have 50 people in a 7,000
Well,
square foot building.
The question,
Yeah,
right?
but you may not want it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
My gut is that, maybe something like 25 max people per building. So if you wanted to do 50 people, you'd have to do 2 buildings. And we probably should separate them by at a certain distance, 50 feet or something like that. I just don't know if it's practical.
To separate them by 50 feet doesn't necessarily make it better. I mean,
But we did
you
have
may
that
have a breezeway, or you may
We've
have
had this
like,
conversation before.
We did.
15 feet or something is
20,
typically
I'm
the
just trying to
separation
make it so
distance.
maybe it's not at closest to one neighbor.
So then you could
maybe
have
it's-
2 7,000 square foot buildings for
No.
50 employees?
No, it says the maximum permitted of any. shall be
Well, I
not
would
exceed
assume-
Of any
7.
building, but if you're making them have two buildings,
It's a 7,000 foot and.
you could technically have two 7,000 square foot buildings.
Aggregated square
It's saying
foot.
the aggregate.
It was meant to be the aggregate, so that, if that's not clear, we can make that clear.
We can make
There's
that-
the-
Asking,
How
'cause-
about all, and not any, all?
In the aggregate.
Okay.
What do you mean, no?
We're,
Well,
Right
we're,
now, it's for us. We're gonna give you an opportunity to speak and tell us
And
why
we-
our logic is faulty.
Well, what
He's
they're
gonna
gonna
have-
say is if you
you're gonna
added
have
up
to
all of
relax,
the
though.
existing housing on the properties, it may exceed 7,000 square feet. That's what they're gonna say. And let me just remind you, this isn't a public hearing, so I do wanna set this for a public hearing.
Yeah.
And I do wanna get everybody's comments from the
Oh, because I
public.
see
Right.
the argument though, because there are already,
I don't
Correct.
like
mind.
superintendent's houses that are probably
Correct.
3,000
If you
square
said,
feet.
if you
So now
say all,
saying
you're gonna
they're
render
50,
those
yeah.
all non-conforming now.
Correct.
So
You know,
that
so-
would be the issue
And
with
look,
that.
when we develop legislation, I have no problem with inviting the industry in to talk about how it affects them and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. But it's also our job to protect the neighbors. So and they're not here and part of this conversation. So we have to step in and do that and start thinking about those things. And it may not be everything that the industry wants, but some things that they'll have to live with because
We're here to
we're
take
doing
down
our
what you
jobs.
want to have legislate, so
Right.
we're fine with whatever you want to do.
well, one question I have is that I'm assuming that these employees are largely related to the maintenance of the golf club, of the course itself. And they have to have access to their equipment, to the machinery and everything else. Is there anything that says that how close they are to being situated to a lot where their equipment is? Or do we say anything about that involving the neighbors where you have that machinery or that facility there on that site?
I mean, when you're looking at, and I don't know which ones you've been to, but they usually have their, turf
Golf.
area and the place for the golf cart, and, when you go in, you'll see like the residential section, and then that's sort of the maintenance section. You could combine them, but I would advocate letting them decide where is best for their
No,
own
and I
thing.
agree, that's kind of
And
the point I was
then
getting to.
go, because if you legislate it up front, it works for the bridge, but it doesn't work for Sabonic,
Sure.
Right,
and so
right.
it's a problem to.
But what I'm asking is, do we have anything on the books relative to obviously we have
Separation
separation,
distances?
noise issues and that, because we're talking about the same thing with employees, on the weekends.
No,
We don't have anything like that.
But I mean,
Like those structures, I mean, I'm just thinking of, it was, I think, Noyak, where they wanted to put one of those, they used, I think, accessory structure setbacks, right? And so those are much smaller than principal, and those were close to the road, and I remember people coming in opposition to that, we're the neighbors, that's too close,
Yeah,
So I think a lot of this is really dictated by what's in the code and then what the planning board thinks is
Right,
appropriate.
because the
And
accessory structures don't include kitchens, so that's.
no, but we were talking about
This
like,
fixes that, but it
yes,
establishes principles.
Yes.
Structure setbacks.
yes, we were looking at this like a house.
You know.
Where do we usually put people? And it's not a house, like you said, because there could be,
Now,
15
we're not
employees.
relaxing other standards here, right? So, a golf course, typically it's a large piece of property in excess of 100 acres, but they may have already exceeded clearing restrictions under the current code or whatever, pre-existing, whatever it is. That would not be able then to clear more land to do this, right? They'd have to abide by the
yeah,
current restrictions, all the other environmental restrictions, IA systems and everything.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, I asked the 7,000 square foot question, because if you're not comfortable with 50 employees in a 7,000 square foot building, why would you be comfortable with 50 employees in two 3,500 square foot buildings? They're the same square feet and the same number of employees.
It'll be 25 per building, right? It'd still be a maximum of 50 employees.
Oh, I understand that, but if the 7,000 is an aggregate over the whole thing, then
Oh,
you're
it's the
still
same
putting
square amount
those
of
employees in
person
the
per
same
square
square
foot.
footage.
Right, well, I didn't say that I wasn't comfortable with that, I was saying I wasn't sure that complied with this state code. But I was uncomfortable with 50 people in one building, though
from safety
I'm-
issue.
It was a
I'm
safety issue,
willing-
that's what I'm asking, is it a safety issue or is it a square footage issue?
Well, it's.
Like living space?
I mean,
When it's built to
I'm gonna-
residential construction standards, they're going to have to put sprinklers in.
It's
There's
part of
occupancy
it's a management
limitations,
issue,
too.
and part of it's a public safety issue. So if
You won't
have-
want it to be a giant party house.
Yes.
Let's say what you're saying.
I wasn't gonna say that, but yes, but that is a concern, that if you're like the house manager and you have 50 people, versus 25 people, it's a, yeah, it wouldn't be 35 people, so you said 35 people, 25 people. If you, but you said 3,500.
So, I mean, that's all I was trying to get at. Were you
Square
worried
feet.
about 50 people in the square footage or 50 people in one location? And it's 50 people.
Well, I
in
just
one
want to make
location.
sure it complies with the state code. It would have to. And we're telling the houses that you can only have so many people per square foot.
Well, it also depends on what facilities that particular building has. So occupancy just for sleeping is different than occupancy including kitchens and, other kinds of things, and I just don't know.
No, it's a good question. If you already have housing for, if you already have housing for 40 people on your golf course, and you have 10 left, should you have a 7,000 square foot house for 10 people? I mean,
No.
I think but that's a good question.
That's the maximum, but the planning board
Allow
would
it.
Why
have to
would you
say
build
it's
it?
only for 10 people, why are you building 7,000 square feet?
Because you might have great dreams, I don't know, but if they're allowed to, it's a possibility that it could be.
The planning board couldn't limit them in
They
square
could.
But this
footage.
wasn't,
Oh.
correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial conversation wasn't to limit the size of the building for people. It was to limit the size of the structure on the golf course.
Yes.
Well,
The
the idea
maximum,
was
yes,
kind of
initially.
twofold, like how much is enough, right? Like how many housing units are we even talking about? The density, and you arrived at 50, and we put it in the code. And then it's how big can any building or
Because I
Big.
remember the conversation being, and I believe it was Councilman Scavone, was what if they want to build like little niche little cottages within it, scattered them, instead of having this giant massive structure. And
That's much better to me.
I believe so too, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why it wasn't, the square footage wasn't to limit, it was just to limit the size of a structure.
So, I think we are open to whatever you want to do.
We-
I mean, but
we
I
could
think
limit
that
the
you
max
also have to.
structure.
What I'm saying, if you do
if they are
maximum
trying to-
7,000 on the cores, then it precludes you from doing little units, because you're gonna eat up that square footage really quickly.
Right, so maybe we should bring down the 7,000 on an individual basis.
But not aggregate.
But not aggregate.
So make it 5.
Well, you would make it number of employees based on law allowable in a structure, and not limit that to a square footage, because that's determined by the maximum allowable occupancy under the law.
I mean, there's a difference between giving someone like a teeny tiny room or giving someone a nice suite.
Well, and this is
So,
where it
like,
comes, this is where I think planning
limit
board
them
needs
if you
some
say, well, this
discretion.
person can only have this much room. It's
So the problem with little
Not as great.
cottages, although it's quaint and it would look nice, it's gonna gobble up square footage, acreage of property. You're gonna use a lot more land to do cottages, whereas you use a much smaller footprint to do one building, but you end up with a much bigger building.
I think
right
maybe
over
we add-
hundreds of acres, though. I mean, you're
Well,
talking about
Right.
the scale of this.
I'm
is-
assuming you have hundreds of acres, but you need it, the golf course is using most of it.
We have
Maybe that's
seen
where we
that.
add the design standards that you were talking about for the planning board. I mean, the planning board has seen these, they have.
Because
you
each
know?
situation is gonna be
It's
unique.
gonna be
Yeah.
unique. What they're proposing is
So
gonna
let's
be
get some input,
unique.
I'm hearing all kinds of sighs of frustration from our
So
audience here.
Janice, just one
Wait,
quick thing.
Sure.
The 7,000 square foot building aggregate doesn't bother me, but the 50 employees at 140 square feet per unit for someone who may be living there year round, because they're not all seasonal, just seems extremely small. So could we reduce the number of possible occupants of that building?
Yes, you can say whatever
Because
you
that's
want
really
here. This is-
dormitory, that's common space, that may even be common bathrooms at
Well,
that.
that's why I don't want
at
to
that
have an
level.
aggregate of $7,000 square feet. I think it
Right.
should be the largest size building you can put in one location
fine,
is
too.
7,000 square feet.
But the amount of people we put in that building.
It's up to them. It's
Well,
up to
that-
them. They
it's
just
also
can't
up
have
to-
more than 50 on the property.
But
And
it's
it's also-
7,000 square feet is a pretty big building.
It's a big
Yeah, it's a
building.
huge
Right, so
building.
maybe if you're gonna encourage that, multiple buildings, we should put a smaller cap on the square footage, like 5,000 square feet.
I don't see the
max.
cap on the bill,
I think that's determined by law, that's
This
what I'm.
is the law that
No,
you're
no, what I'm
determining.
saying is
It's
that
the
if you,
occupancy of the
if you give
rooms.
somebody an amount of square footage, most likely I would want to take advantage of that. If I was an owner, I would want to do that. But if I am restricted to the number of employees, that dictates the square footage
Well, we
automatically
didn't want to
under
restrict
New York
anyone to
state
the
law.
number of employees they need to have. So
Well, that's it,
their
but I don't know,
operations and
I
their
don't, I
employees.
What if
will
you-
hear,
Not
I'm
every
sure.
employee
If
lives
you
there.
kept it to 50
right?
employees and you, let's say you maxed out at 5,000 square feet, and with an aggregate of 10,000 square feet, you could do two 5,000 square foot buildings.
It
That
depends
might
on
be
what the
better than one
occupancy is,
7,000
Jay.
square foot
That's
building.
200 square foot.
If it's a building with facilities as opposed to a dormitory, there's very
I think
different
it'd be easier to
occupancy
just
requirements.
ask Wayne.
Yeah,
instead of trying to
I'd
figure
like
it
to
out.
say that we did have a golf course that did historically have residential structures as part of their golf course. I think between 9 and 16, 9 and 18, they had a bunch of like small cottages. Those cottages are now gone, and then there are structures closer to the road. So that indicates to me that golf courses would most likely have these structures away from the playing areas to the best of their ability.
Sure.
And that's
Well, that
something that
makes
we
sense.
have to keep in
Logical.
mind, and that's what we're
then it comes down
dealing
to,
with.
the
and
only
they
thing I
would
would say
likely
is
want to
missing
build
it.
one building to the greatest degree possible, put everybody in one building, because it's easiest, it's cheapest and easiest.
You may want to also include like requirements that they have it, solar or oriented for passive solar or green roofs or
Sustainability.
something
Let's
like
get past
sustainable
these other
too,
neighborly
so it
things.
blends in with the
So
surrounding.
Wayne Bruin, who I suspect is representing Atlantic Golf Course.
I've also
Among others.
represented almost all the other golf courses. We have 9 golf courses in the town of Southampton.
Are you speaking on behalf of all of them? Who are you
I
representing?
cannot represent that I represent all of them, but I have had discussions with most. I have represented Atlantic, I have represented National, I've represented Sabonic, Southampton, and
Who are you representing today?
Atlantic,
Okay, thanks.
Southampton, and National.
Okay.
And I've been involved with, as a staff planner for the town of Southampton in the 80s, reviewing approvals of employee housing at golf courses. I've been also represented these golf courses as in applications before the planning board.
Give me again, the Atlantic, Sabonic, and National?
National, yes, in Southampton.
Oh, not Sabonic.
And Sabonic, yes,
So you're.
Today.
You're
Yes.
working,
Okay.
you're here as a rep of all those today?
yes.
But,
So all of those all have employee housing. About the only golf courses that don't have on-site is Noyak, Bridgehampton being a 9-hole golf course, and Hampton Hills.
now, some of those are PDDs, right? And they're not affected by this law? I think,
The only
Well,
one
like
that's a
Katie said, it
PDD
doesn't
is
matter how you
Sabonic.
got it, it just matters whether or not you want to
Right.
now.
No,
The
but in
bridge
terms of-
is a quip sub.
right,
That was
so
approved as a quip
that's not
sub.
affected by
Atlantic was a special exception use, and all the others were pre-existing.
pre-existing. Okay, so this law that we're discussing today would not affect the quip suds or the
It doesn't
PDDs?
affect how you got it. It doesn't affect.
Oh, it doesn't?
It doesn't. It just doesn't matter. Like if
Okay.
you got it as a PDD, a special exception, you were
That's a
pre-existing.
change.
All
That's a
that
change.
is sort
So
of,
you've changed it
doesn't
from the
matter.
original? Now
Well, it doesn't
applies
matter
to
how you got it. It matters what you're trying to do,
But you
which
still
is
would
put
then need, if
employee
it's a
housing.
PDD that brought you the golf course, you would need to amend the PDD to do this.
You may, because of the legislation. Sabonic's legislation actually indicates such, but they have employee housing as part of that, and there was limitations in the PDD for Sabonic.
I'm just saying that that is a change that I wasn't aware of from the first version to this one.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2 things. One is I think you're trying to recognize that what is out there is already legal and existing, and that which the planning board has approved. 2 things that I heard in your discussion. One is recognizing the planning board has had the authority to review and approve this and has done a pretty good job. That's number one. Number 2 is when you're creating special exception standards that would apply to any future expansions or additions to any of these golf courses, then you're talking about setting standards, and as the staff said, you got to be careful. One thing you'll know is this industry is one of your biggest employers. Staff housing, it provides affordable housing where there is none. It's limited, it helps eliminate traffic to the highways and so on. It is primarily seasonal housing, and it ranges from the maintenance employees to the in-house staff to professionals and the like. So the housing on a variety of these places it comes in different forms. National had it long before any of us were around. Their clubhouse has employee housing. They then, in the 80s, got a building separate. And then more recently, when they redid their entire maintenance facility, they did additional. As far as the size, I believe the size came as what you're trying to keep the residential character, because most of these are residential character. You wanted a size. As far as the occupancy, New York State Building Code limits that. They're also subject to the temporary housing requirements, the so-called from the health department. You have to get a permit. And they have standards about size. None of these structures have 50 people in it. Atlantic has 3 existing buildings, okay, which were renovations of the existing farm buildings. And we have approval to add this new building, which is the 7,000 square feet, I believe, is a total floor area. So it's not, you know, a footprint where you would have 14,000 or whatever it is. It's total floor area. And in that, they got approval from the planning board for a 6,500 square foot building that includes space like laundry area and things in the basement, but that has 16 employees, 16 beds.
So typically, how many people per building?
It depends on the facility. Sabonic has a larger building, much larger than 7,000 square feet, and they have a number of employees, up to 40 employees.
40 in one building?
Yeah, not, well, I'm not exactly sure, but it could be one building. And that was part of your PDD approval. And again.
That was a repurposed building too, right?
No, Sabonic was
brand
all
new?
brand new.
Okay.
So, but most other places, Shinnecock has 2 buildings with 10 beds in each building. That's typical what you see. And you got to understand, as the board recognized, golf courses, they're not, the first thing is that these are, there's a certain scale, shall we say, that the golf course is looking for and management. You talk about barbecues and things like that. None of that occurs on any of these golf courses. Employee housing is a privilege that is given to the employees. They're highly restricted. Their meals on practically all of these are all done in the clubhouse. That's where they get their meals. They have kitchenettes. They can reheat and likely that kind of thing, but they're not cooking their meals, that kind of thing. The activities, there's no barbecues, there's no sports activities, things like that occur in any of these housing facilities. Again, it's about the interaction with the golf, it's the interaction with the neighbors. The golf clubs are pretty attuned to managing their housing. Again, it's a privilege. And it's something that all the golf clubs, I recently had an inquiry from Westhampton Golf Course, which is in the village of Westhampton. But they're looking to try to accommodate new housing in a variety of different locations. And because they're on the border of the town and the village, they're looking at various issues of how, when, where, and how they can do that. And they consulted me on that. So the key right now, it's in flux because we can't tell any of the golf courses that they have the ability. Recently, and what prompted all this was the ZBA's reaction to a neighbor's inquiry on the Atlantic Golf Course's planning board's approval. Interestingly, while that was all happening, running parallel to our approval, and the planning board approved it also, was housing at the bridge. And not a peep, not a question. But they're held up now, supposedly, because the ZBA decision, and subject, and the ZBA basically said, this is a legislative matter that this board should react to and look to the past and the history of providing this type of housing. It's limited. And to the extent that I look that the planning board has done a fantastic job. Certain limited standards that I think that Janice and Katie have put together will likely work. The setbacks, what I've seen. However, in recognizing that the planning board should have some flexibility. On Southampton, the front portion, the clubhouse and everything is in the highway business zone. They got permission to put on what was a highway business parcel. They demolished the structure that was there, got planning board approval to put their housing right next to where the clubhouse is. But if you look to see setbacks, they don't meet any of these setbacks for that. But it's also in the highway business zone, and they're not near any residences. So the planning board should have the flexibility where the impact that you're trying to protect against is what Janice has described as impact on nearby residents. Southampton, Shinnecock, National, all extend across streets. They have separate parcels. So there's, properties, you got to make sure you have flexibility.
Well, this doesn't allow for other properties to be involved with new construction.
Well,
It says
I
it has
think
to be on the
it-
golf course.
Yeah, but their golf course extends over separate parcels.
Saying there's,
That's
holes
what I
on
was
other.
describing
currently
earlier,
there
where
are-
there's maybe 2 tax map
Currently are,
lots.
but in this legislation that you're showing me, it says right from the front that it's got to be on the golf course.
Yeah.
It can't be on a separate parcel.
Yeah, you can't, Southampton couldn't buy a piece of property in Bridgehampton and put their housing
Or
there.
even a piece of property across the street and put their house.
No, what I was saying is the golf course itself is on
Yeah,
separate
if there's
parcels.
holes on that course, that's.
Yeah,
where
So,
the
but
golf
the other
Maybe
thing
more than one
is
tax
all
map
4 of those
parcel.
golf courses abut each other. So there could be an opportunity, as was recognized by staff, that the,
Combine them.
that the housing, even though it's residentially zoned, all the golf courses are pretty much residentially zoned, but you may be putting housing next to another golf course, not next to houses. So that flexibility, and I see that, so the points that you raised, but I want to say, as far as the occupancy of the building, the golf course, they're not going to be building for future. Atlantic has 120 seasonal employees. They have housing 22, 24 now. The approval they got for the new building was 16. That would bring them up to 38. It's an expensive proposition to do it. It's an expensive proposition for the golf courses to manage it, but they recognize that they need to do it, particularly for a certain number of employees. It's almost impossible now to maintain certain employees. The labor, lower level, it comes and goes. But when you're starting to try to bring in professionals that are got to be, and other, to keep those staff here, you got to have housing for them. They're not here, you bring them in, a lot of them leave for the season, they go to Florida or wherever it is, and they work at a golf course in Florida, and then they come up for the season and work here. If you don't have housing for them, they're not going to take the job. And then that has been the difficulty, like we all know, is trying to get an employee anywhere out here now is difficult.
That's why we're here, that's why we're
Yeah.
doing this. I mean, I think the board is familiar with most of the courses and management, and we know that there are good management across the board, and we're obviously familiar with the need for workforce housing. When we write legislation, though, we have to think about the future, we have to, protect against, people trying to take advantage of these codes in the future in any way that, could happen. So I think it's important to think about the neighbors and to think about adverse impacts that might occur sometime in the future. The issues that I think the 2 biggest issues the board has raised is how many people per building and the size of the building. So you're sort of saying that in general, you don't have that many people per building. So if we were to limit occupancy on an individual building to, let's say, 20 or 25 people, is that a problematic requirement?
It could, you have a pre-existing situation in some of these instances, so the
Well,
question
forget about
is.
pre-existing, we would the grandfather those, but in terms of new
Right, but you
construction-
grandfather them, but then they want to alter anything, then they need a variance. So that's the concern, is one of the things we had suggested to staff is at least to recognize the ability, among other things, like at Atlantic, they repurposed buildings. And there was, even with the 7,000 square foot, there might be a building where you would repurpose and it's bigger or whatever, and that there should be, the planning board should have the flexibility to say, yeah, rather than build a whole new building, I'd like to repurpose that. So there was at least a recognition that you might give the planning board that flexibility to do that.
Or they could go to the zoning board too and get.
Well, that's the point, is otherwise you're sending them to the zoning board, which is not ideal, because
Wouldn't
the
be
zoning
very-
board is not supposed to be granting
It
variances.
wouldn't be very often. You're talking about a hypothetical situation where some big barn maybe would get repurposed, a barn exceeding 7,000 square feet.
And that's exactly what happened at Atlantic.
Right. In which case, I think the zoning board would look at that and say, well, yes, it's over 7,000 square feet, but it makes sense, or whatever. I think that we do need to set some sort of cap on an individual basis, so I'm looking for some guidance as to what the industry could accept there.
The total floor area of 7,000 square feet could be a two-story building, right? Like,
Yes.
that's what we're saying. Okay. So, you could add a footprint standard there with a footprint not exceeding,
It
something.
doesn't necessarily change anything.
No,
the
no,
same
I think what
size.
Jay is trying to get to, what I'm saying is what you were recognizing is state code and the county regulations actually will dictate spacing inside the building. You're not gonna get 50 in a 7,000 square foot building.
You might, actually. That's like 140 square feet per person.
I don't think you
No,
need the
but you need
standards.
laboratories, you need facilities, you
You
need a
need,
lot
yeah,
of things that are
hallway
imposed
space, you
on that.
need all
Basic
that,
bedroom
like,
space in a dwelling is more than
What is it?
140
Is it
square feet.
400? I couldn't remember what it was.
You need like a
the
lot of
minimum size
mechanical
of a-
space.
It affects the
Bedroom.
septic requirements, it affects a whole bunch of stuff.
I think the 50 may be hanging you up where you think that 50 is definitely going in one building, where
Right,
Yeah,
what
but
they're
there's a
saying is not
possibility, So we
necessarily.
have to think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
So there should be either a minimum square footage per person, per dwelling, apartment, whatever you want to call it. My son was in this industry. He's been lived on 3 of these golf courses in Oakmont and Bandon Dunes, and their jobs and everybody at Penn State that went to careers in this all needed the housing. There's no question that there's no room for these kids to come to the Hamptons. I housed kids for 3 years. So this is very important. I just want to make sure that those units are, big enough for the kids, especially if they stick around, and it's not just, interns and pros, but people who work year-round. I don't want to, we're trying to do affordable housing for people, but I don't want to stick them in a 140 or 180 square foot little apartment with a hot plate, you know what I mean? So I just want to make sure, however we figure this out, that, we have enough square
So then
footage.
maybe you say you can't, the total floor area can't exceed 7,000, but as like Supervisor was saying, no more than 25 employees per building. That gives
Or we
everybody
could
lots
say
of room.
a new building.
Yeah, new buildings,
For new
No more
buildings,
than
yeah.
25 employees in any new building.
in any new building.
Does
Would
that
that
seem like
help
a
you?
good number, 25, 20?
I think, I would say that the way I've seen the trend with all the golf courses, that any new construction is not exceeding 25, so that might be acceptable.
Okay.
We need to know the square footage per person in
Yeah.
these things.
And
I mean,
that's actually
something I
dictated by
asked her,
law.
you know,
Yeah.
that-
I will find that. I mean,
Trying to do
it's
the
in
math
here. I
without
just don't know where it's
having
in.
the,
I mean, are you okay with
Nominated,
this,
nominated.
a 7,000 square foot building with 25 people in it? Assuming it meets the code.
Yeah.
That's over 300 square feet.
So that would be a two-story,
That-
3,500 square
That's
foot.
about
These are about
300 square feet per person.
But that's the maximum again, and then the
Yeah.
planning
That's the
board
maximum
is.
allowable.
I'm getting
Right.
280 square feet.
280.
Yeah.
You have to take into account hallways,
Yes.
mechanicals, like it's not
Right.
gonna be.
Because it is
you know.
wall to wall. The
Yeah.
7,000 square feet is wall to wall.
So
It may
Well,
include a basement.
So
all
you could end up
depends on the
with two
design.
7,000 square foot buildings, each housing 25 people. Is
You
that
have
something?
that, you
you-
have that on many of them now, is that correct, Wayne?
Yes, but I think in some of the cases, like Sabonic, I would imagine the building exceeds 7,000 square feet.
Right.
So you're limiting that, and you would have broken those buildings up in this kind of forward design. But again,
It's a
they're-
different use, it's a building with different uses in it, and I think we keep getting on this idea that you have a 7,000 square foot building that's only there to house people. And what I'm saying is that there's an opportunity for any business to mix those uses. You could have part golf, you could have part facilities, you could have housing, it could all be under one roof, and I think that's the part that I'm getting hung
This is
up
limited to
on.
staff housing, you couldn't put a pro shop or something.
Well, I don't know, I'm not sure.
Well, you're
that-
saying it, you're
Yeah,
determining it,
I'm
right
just-
here.
It
You get
would,
to
it
say.
wouldn't make any sense for.
You're not saying, oh, we're only having 15, but the restaurant down the road, we're gonna give them 10. We're not saying that in any way. We're saying only for
But
the
how are
golf
we
course
precluding
employees.
that if?
They have to come to the planning board and show their employment
Well,
records.
that's,
I mean,
and we're
you
back
could
to the
have
planning board.
related
Yeah.
To the housing uses, so you could have laundry.
Well, you'd
I
have to
suppose
have
you could
one.
have
May have storage in the
You could
basement
have
for
a
like your
treadmill or
bicycle
something.
or whatever,
Right.
an equipment.
fitness room or something
Yeah.
like that, but
I mean, some entertainment.
I mean, I
TV
don't know who
rooms.
remembers Bayberry that was on the property of Savonic, how big that was. It's like,
I mean,
50,000 square foot
you don't want
building.
to stack people into,
That's
dormitory
what the electrician
style.
said.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm back to the same question though, would the board be comfortable with a 7,000 square foot limit on a per building basis and no more than 25 people? So you could end up with multiple, like two 7,000 square foot buildings, or even potentially three of them.
And
If they
specify
only
that it's
did
on new buildings.
15 people per building, which I don't think they would, but
It would make no economic
I
sense
would,
to do that.
I would max out the aggregate at, if you're doing, maybe at double that, like 14,000 square feet aggregate staff housing
Of
For
new
new-
construction.
of new construction.
See, that's the thing, I think if
I
we could
wouldn't
just
want
tie
more
it to the
than
new
two
construction.
7,000 square foot buildings.
Because, yeah, like I said, and Wayne has even said, there's already housing out there, so we're saying any new, you can't have any more than, like you said, 14,000 square feet of new construction, no more than 25 employees in each structure for new employees, and then the planning board is gonna do everything else. They're gonna site it, they're gonna screen it if necessary, they're gonna move the parking.
Yeah,
And
I'd
then we'll
almost
add
like to
those-
encourage people to build smaller buildings and more of them and do more of a cottage style with like 10 people per building. But that would be 5 buildings. So if you did an aggregate of 14,000, you sort of solve the problem.
Well, I think you're also limiting it because every time you build a new building, and there's economy, of
Yeah,
building one
but-
building, and now you have all the hallway spaces and all that eat up floor area, which, when you do more units in one building, so
but
if you
some
do
gov-
larger, I mean, if you do several smaller buildings, you're gonna need more aggregate floor area.
You might, but
And land.
that breaking up of the massing might, in some cases, might be more expensive. It might be beneficial to the golf course, in terms of the scenic vistas and, that you don't have these large buildings. You have these small little cottages might feel more a part of the landscape.
Well, that's where the planning board, you're gonna add that
More
standard that said
expensive,
the
but-
massing and arrangements, and then that will give them the ability to say, well, we don't think it should be this big, massive conglomerate. What else can you show us? And then they can
Right.
come up with something
Right,
that gives them the
it's,
ability.
They might
to
want
say
the
that.
largest building to be their clubhouse.
I
and
think
not their
everybody has
housing.
to keep in mind too that these are like huge money-making enterprises that don't want anything that looks tacky or out of place to begin with. I can't
Right.
see them doing anything that's less than tasteful.
Yes.
No, and I also
That's-
look at the fact that, again, we're talking about nine,
Unless it's away,
Right.
and that's really what we're looking at.
9 or 10
If they can figure out a way to
facilities,
put it
most
in a
of which
place
already
where
have
they don't
existing
see it,
housing.
so we have to
Can,
address
can
that.
can I ask you a question?
You're right,
Wayne?
they want to
And
make it.
Feel free not to answer. I'm just curious as how that arrangement works with, you hire an employee and you provide them the housing on that facility. Is that part of their overall salary, is it a lease option? How does that work? I'm just curious about that.
From what I understand on most, first of all, it's a privilege, there's an agreement.
Right.
It is not part of their salary. It is recognized, but I'm sure Scott is our manager at Atlantic. He could probably tell you the details, but as far as Atlantic is concerned, but it is not part of their salary. So if they, for example, they're drinking, that's at Atlantic, it's prohibited. And they are found to be violating their housing privilege, they could be kicked out of the housing, but still remain an employee. So it's not directly tied to the employment, but it's an added privilege that they're offered, and it may be part of their compensation package in that direction.
I only ask you that because when I was in college, I got a job in England and I went over to it and housing was I was given housing, and then lo and behold, I got charged at the end of my term when I left, which I didn't know about. So I was just curious how that works. But
We're not regulating that though, so if it's part of.
no, it was
If
it
it's
was a
part of the
question that I
wages-
just asked personally.
Sure.
I'm assuming they're either gonna have lower
lower wages because they're providing housing, or they're gonna do some sort of chargeback?
No,
No?
They'd be
That's not what happened to me.
taxed on
I'm gonna tweak this, and I'm gonna set it for a
So
public
can
hearing.
we go over the tweaks? So this,
So what we said was.
This is what I have. This is basically applying to new construction, that the 50-person max, which you already had, and a 7,000 square foot max per building, but no more than 25-person max per building.
For new building.
For new building, and a 14,000 square foot max aggregate for new construction. So, and then were there other things that we talked about earlier?
Well, I have F, massing of buildings.
And then, yeah,
Massing and arrangement of buildings and associated facilities parking shall be so situated to reduce, minimize
effects.
any
Like a design
impacts.
standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And then just check that
and
against
then I have the,
law.
well,
Yep.
the occupancy standards shall not exceed of building code, the 25 max per building, and the allowance to repurpose existing buildings.
And that was new construction over and above what they already had.
Yeah.
And
Can I
if there's
just-
gotta be two 7,000 square foot buildings, there should be a reasonable separation between the buildings. It's probably a requirement, right?
I'm sure there is, and again, it'll be like a design
Again, so
standard.
situated,
Yeah.
so that way they can say, well, these are two, and this is over here, put that one here and put this one there, and, you know.
At least like a 25-foot, something.
We all.
So it doesn't feel
to-
like one giant building. if
Well,
it's-
that's when we say, that's what, when the planners, when we look at stuff, that's
I'm okay
literally
leaving it
what
to
we
the
do.
planning board.
Yeah.
You know? to-
When you say new construction, you're not talking about extensions to existing
No, I'm talking about new
construction.
construction.
You're
New,
talking
new
totally new,
standalone.
Totally
freestanding.
standalone, yeah.
But then
I just wanna be
that would
clear.
leave open an exemption for extensions on existing buildings that, right, they could do two new
Well, the
structures and an
new
extension, and that would need to be addressed.
And they'd still have a max of 50 employees.
You still have your max, you still have your new standard and your aggregate,
Can we,
right? So you have all that covered.
can we go over the allowable zones here? Which is that other sheet?
I'd like that addressed in some way
Okay.
before we move off of it, because we're talking about two new structures, and
Okay, so
an
your question
extension
is,
could be.
what if an extension on
Yeah,
existing?
an extension could be determined if it's a new structure, if it's 7,000 square feet, or,
Okay.
for example. I mean, that's,
We'll, take a look at that.
okay.
It's
So, you know-
likely that's not gonna comply with the setbacks, though.
Yeah.
So
You know?
I'm sure
I
when-
agree, I just,
Yeah, what do we do?
you're right.
I'm sure when you did the use table, you looked at the 12 golf courses that exist in the town.
I thought so, but Wayne told me that Southampton's in highway business,
Yeah,
so I did not.
A portion, just that front portion.
So you have basically all your residential districts listed on this classification, and you're allowing it as special exemption in all of them, except the ones that actually allow for the highest density of housing, the R20s, R50s, and R10s. And it's probably that it's because there are no golf courses in those zones, but logic would dictate that those would be the ones where it would make the most sense, not the least sense.
Well, you're thinking that you have to put some kind of multifamily overlay here, and you don't.
What I'm
The
saying is
golf- we're
that
just saying
if
we're-
that golf course, 100-acre golf course, if the underlying zoning is R20, half-acre zoning,
It's not.
It's
None
not,
of
they
them are.
don't
These
exist
are
there.
all, they don't exist. So only these are,
And you can't
except for
have
the
any
highway
new ones.
business.
That's why it's
This
so
is where it
strange.
is.
right, well, it's counterintuitive is what I'm saying, is that if there was a golf course in an R20 zone and the golf course said, I don't want to be a golf course anymore, they're developing at half-acre zonings. They're gonna
But
have
there is no golf
tremendous
course in
density.
R20 anywhere.
Right, so if
How
you're
could there
doing
be?
We
a
looked
use
at it.
table, well, why didn't you just put SE across the board there?
Because it doesn't make sense, because they don't exist. Like, if there's no golf course, then there's no quarters for employees of said golf course.
I
Right?
understand that, there's none in those categories. But
There's
just
no
from,
golf.
in terms of constructing a use table,
So you would have
though,
to like tear down like an entire neighborhood in R20, create a golf course, and then it would apply.
And you'd have
Right?
to
That
add
doesn't-
it, you'd
when's
have to
that
add it as a
happening?
permitted use in the town code, which
Yeah,
does
it's
not
not
exist.
permitted.
so when I look at a use table, I go, okay, it should be like logical to me. So-
Nothing about this is logical, because the town code doesn't have golf course as a P
As a-
anywhere
right.
in the code.
Yes.
Right, I
We
understand
only
that.
can- we can
But
only
when you
go
look
by-
at a use table and you go, okay, where are gas stations allowed? Where is restaurants are out? You know, you want to, commercial zones, whatever it is. You know, where are apartments, buildings allowed? And you probably have it in those areas that have higher
Where are
density.
living quarters allowed on a golf course?
So
Where there
you-
is a golf course?
so
Where
you-
is there a golf course
so you-
in these zones that
You
say
just
SE?
put X's in
Right, just the villages.
categories that
Where they
there,
don't
there's no
exist.
golf
Quogue and
courses.
West Hampton Beach, but.
So
they're
you sort
villages.
of,
In England,
that's
they
not
allow-
normally how I would approach a use table.
This-
I would have done it the
I
other way.
listen, I totally agree, but we don't even have, you know, normally you would see where your permitted use is, and then you would see where the
I would have just put
accessory uses
SEs across the board.
Would have been the same, right?
It would have been the same
Just
effect,
not applicable.
just more
I
like,
could put NA,
Yeah.
I can put an SE if you want there, just they don't exist.
yeah. You could put, you could leave it blank. I don't know. But it just makes it look like if you had an R10 zone, what is that?
Yeah, it would
like?
be like, no housing for you.
No housing for the golf
The
course
highest-
employee
the
that
highest-
doesn't exist
The
on a
highest
golf course.
density of housing
We need a
zone,
sign
and
permit.
You can't do
The
staff
optics,
housing,
you know,
you know, so,
We only just did it logically. We looked at all the zoning of
I
where
can't,
the
I can't
zoning
believe there's
for the
any
golf
that
course.
are in a mobile home subdivision residence either, a golf course, and I can't believe, well.
They're only in what's in
And
here
what?
with the exception of highway.
Are you thinking there are
It's in
gonna be
one part.
future golf courses?
No, I just want the chart to
Just
make
want it to be
sense, so somebody
symmetric.
looks at it and says, oh, that was
Accessory use to a
logical.
mobile home.
I just want it to be logical.
But you have
OSC,
Put an NA in.
OSC is, yeah, NA is, I'm okay,
I'll do NAs, I'll confirm where they all are, I'll add highway business, and I'll put NAs.
yeah, I'm fine with that.
You
Just
got
make it
Do we
NA.
have NA in any
And then
other
what about
district?
OSC is
I
open
don't know
space
that
con,
we do this normally.
we definitely have golf
Not
courses in OSCs,
It's not a problem.
but OSC is an open space conservation, and some
We have
of
them
the
in
courses.
Quipside, not OSC. We don't have golf courses in OSC. We have them in the Quipside zone.
I don't know, Janice and I just kind of
Which golf
checked
course
where
is
the zoning
OSC?
applied.
Isn't
Well,
there a public course that's
They looked at them all and there weren't any.
OSC?
The one that we own?
The one that we,
Proxima?
Proxima?
That's not an A, is that 18
That's a.
hole?
No, it's not.
did we
it's
zone that
not- It doesn't
OSC?
even apply
Yeah.
here because you can't do living quarters
Unless it's
unless
18 holes.
it's 18 holes, and that's
Right.
a
It's in the
public
village of
course.
Sagaponic.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm okay if it's zoned open space conservation to not put an X there. You know, I don't mind that, but,
Is it
and so you're questioning whether we've done it
We don't
NAs
write
anywhere else.
NA, we
But
typically just put an X if it's not permitted.
Or you put blank, you don't put anything there, and then it's assumed to be prohibited. Right, I've seen lots of empty boxes in those use tables.
If that's your preference, we can put a blank or an NA, whatever you think is
Just put the
appropriate.
X like every other one.
It-
No, X means
Whatever you
somebody
want.
made a decision that it's really inappropriate for that zone, and not
So then if it's even in question, put a,
NA.
Why
Put
don't
an
we put an
SE.
asterisk at the bottom and say, you know, it's not permitted because it's
I'm
golf
okay
courses
with
don't
either
exist
putting
there.
SE, NA, or blank. That's, solves the problem.
Okay.
Then at least it's logical. And you could, if you still want to do an asterisk as to why it's NA, you can just do that. There are no golf courses in these zones.
You got it.
Okay?
We could do that.
With in ink.
I mean, yeah.
I'm sure this isn't gonna be open and closed after one hearing, so we'll just,
No, we gotta wait
let's
it to go.
just give it a shot.
Yeah. It should be logical. That's all. All right.
We like being logical, so that's a good thing.
I aim for it.
National basis. I know it's picayune, but
It's,
There you go, that's fine.
I'd like to say a word about the zoning board of appeals, and, you know, that was brought up today. That application for one particular golf course was brought before the zoning board of appeals, and a neighbor, I believe, challenged the building inspector's ruling on that. Is that correct? In other words, and they said this is a legislative issue.
Yes, the
and they-
ZBA said this is a
That's why it
legislative-
is here before us. And I
Correct.
applaud them for doing it. You know, I know it's more time for the applicant and others, but
Yes,
it's
that-
being done the way it should be done,
I think it
in my
was
opinion.
kicked to the ZBA by the planning board, right? Because it needed a variance?
No, the
Because there
neighbors-
was excess, You couldn't
mean-
put kitchens and accessory
The,
structures?
the golf course was before the planning board. The building department had opined that it was an appropriate use, that housing was an golf course housing for
Accessory
employees was
use.
an accessory use. They went to the planning board, they kept moving forward. In the meantime, the neighbors appealed the building department's interpretation that it was an accessory use. So while they were going
Because
through
it
the
had
planning.
kitchens which were prohibited in
cooking and
accessory
sleeping.
uses.
Correct, and that's what the ZBA said. The ZBA said this is not an appropriate accessory use, you need to go to the town board and change it, but the golf course has sued the zoning board for that interpretation as well. So we got a whole bunch of things going on.
Okay,
But that's how it came to the ZBA. That was their finding.
okay. So, but the ZBA ruled that under the current code, you can't do this.
Correct.
Right, and then the ZBA was sued by the golf courses.
Correct.
Right, but they
Okay.
bring up a legitimate point that it's not addressed legislatively, and we agree. And it really does, and that we
Which is why
are
we're here.
very appreciative that instead of legislating from a variance
Mm-hmm.
world, they brought it correctly to your,
Right,
Yes.
and not necessarily to do, but just to recognize certain things are legislative matters
doesn't
and to
that
keep
sort of
them
go
back to
against
this
their legal
order
argument?
are good. So we were glad that they did that.
And so am I. Thank you for clarifying that point if it wasn't clear.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, I know you have another one.
One more.
I'll be right back.
I never sat for an hour and a half and didn't say a word.
No, thank you very much for not saying a word.
It's much better on that side of the table. I didn't realize it until today. But I was
You've
like,
been here.
Appearances are deceiving.
You've been
no, I've
here.
been on that side of the table.
You've left an impression. I see it in the seat back there.
I know. You can sit through my picture. I didn't know it was going to be that long.
It's a lasting impression, Dennis.
Well, I could have come up 5 minutes before. I was watching it on TV.
It's not 12 yet, Cindy. We're not even in the PM. Good night. Thanks for coming.
All right, so we're moving on to another
passing that.
topic. What's that, Dan? All right, so we're moving on to TDR sanitary credit
I
flow
think I made some
program.
changes since our last meeting.
I'm gonna grab something from my office while we wait for John.
Pass, taking it back?
And Dave can pass his since he's made changes now.
Okay.
Well, we talked about it.
Oh, okay, great. These were from
The only-
most recent.
The only thing is that, well, just take one and pass it down. The only thing is mine is not in red because I didn't hit the color print, but you've got the crossouts and the underlines. This one.
3 golf
Do you have
courses
an
and
extra one?
villages.
Dave? Right here. Sorry.
All right, West Hampton, Quogue, and Sagaponic, epoxy bugs.
I've got
So-
one for you too.
Was that this West Hampton? Is in West Hampton Beach?
Yeah, and it also goes outside of the
Sounds
village.
like West.
It sprawls
We're
through
gonna be here.
Epoxy bugs inside
There's
Epoxy.
extras
What's
over
the
here,
third?
sorry, Dave.
Quogue.
Quogue has
There's a
it.
9-hole there.
Okay.
I thought there were 10. I count them up.
I thought it was 12,
Yeah, I thought that was 12 too.
All right.
but I might have counted the 9 holes. I'm sure I did.
I know there's one public. You know, as a triple-digit golfer
There may be
myself.
some that are on private
I remember
property.
Dave.
I don't think those count, though.
With E.
Oh, the golf hole?
Yeah, somebody has a
Remember?
9-hole course on
yeah.
there.
Right across from Atlantic.
Yeah. Their own
It's
property.
9 holes no, it's 6 holes with 3 tees. That's,
I've played that one too.
oh, yeah,
Really? Even though it's on the private, well, you gotta know the person, I guess.
right.
It's not for long.
You got powerful friends, right?
Probably recommend give it to you.
All right. We're waiting on, I think we should wait for John, so just give us a minute. There he is. All right. So we can get started. So we're talking about TDR Sanitary Credit Flow Program. We're joined once again by Jenna Shearer, our Town Planning and Development Administrator,
Thank you.
and David Wilcox, our Director of Planning. So,
Thank you.
Janice, you want to introduce it?
So, well, I'll let Dave explain, but mostly this is that we're sort of memorializing what we already do with the county one by one. And if we change our code and the county recognizes our program, it would just make it an easier system. So we're basically just memorializing something we already do so that the county can recognize our program, and then we can more easily allocate development rights to people for sewage credits. So I'll let Dave explain all that, but and just as a background, we know that development rights are the backbone of property rights. People have rights to their property, the rights to develop their property. When they don't develop their property, they may go into what's considered a development right certificate, where what they're entitled to as far as credits go. We buy those, as you know, from farmland. So this whole program is related to sort of lifting those rights, putting them on certificates, and we move density from environmentally sensitive areas, and we use those certificates in various ways to offset sewage flow requirements or things like that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
All right.
Thank you.
Just for some background, I'm sure most of you know, the health department has sanitary flow requirements for different types of development. If you're a single-family home, if you're senior housing, if you're an apartment, there's different gallonage of flow that is required for different development. If a developer goes into the health department for an approval, let's say you comply with town zoning, right? And your density complies. You might go to the health department will say, you don't meet the size of your property doesn't meet our sanitary flow standards. You need to bring in credits, sanitary flow credits. And if you don't meet their health department standards, you go to the health department's board of review, which is basically a zoning board for the health department. And the board of review will typically tell a developer, go transfer sanitary credits, go find some credits. Right now, the health department automatically recognizes the Pine Barrens TDR program, East Hampton TDR program, Huntington, Southold, and Smithtown. So if you're in one of those towns or you're using the Pine Barrens TDR program, you don't have to go to the board of review. The health department will issue approvals with development rights under those programs. What we want to do is get our TDR program recognized so that people don't have to go to the board of review. And we've determined that it's a pretty simple process for us to amend. We have a TDR allocation code, which is 244, which is what we use every time we issue these certificates that Jay's familiar with, but I don't know how many of the town board members have actually seen a certificate that gets issued when people like Joe Gaza come in and they deed the land to the town and they get a development rights certificate. So I've amended 244 to every place where it said development rights certificate, it now says development rights certificate and or sanitary flow credit. And when we issue our certificates, we will add the number of sanitary flow credits that are associated with that certificate. Right now, we have several things on there depending on how you're using the credit. If you're using it for old file map, you get a different allocation. If you're using it for described property, you get a little different allocation.
So the allocation process will remain the same?
Allocation process will remain the same. And to some extent, our code always recognized that these could be used for sanitary flow. And they will be, but the health department will send you to the board of review. We want to make it very easy for the board of review. We'll put the actual gallonage on these certificates so the health department and the applicant or the owner of the certificate knows what its value is.
Will it be retroactive to certificates already issued?
Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah, I don't see why not. It just won't state on the certificate what it is, but we would be able to calculate it.
Be in our code.
Yeah.
Is it what's the word I'm looking for?
Transferable?
I mean, you transferable? No, not transferable, but sanitary flow versus development rights in terms of
Is it
quantifying.
equivalent?
Could you use one
Are
without
they
the other?
equivalent?
Well, yeah, so, let's say you're trying to build a carriage house or do extra clearing on your property. It really has nothing to do with sanitary flow. And you're transferring a credit that related to certain, what the zoning category was on that property might have nothing to do with the sanitary
Correct.
I
flow.
was
That's correct.
So-
Totally
This
correct.
allows
do
you
now.
to
So you
do
sort of
both.
have to normalize that.
Yes,
And do you propose to do that here?
yes. The health department, the health department will use the term sanitary credit or development right credit. I don't like to use that term. I like to refer to the number of gallons that you need. Now, for the health department, they just say one credit is worth 300 gallons. All right?
We can't really do that, though, right?
No,
We
and
can't, right.
we don't do that.
We don't
When we
do
do it now on a case-by-case basis, we break it down by the actual gallonage that you need. We'll find a piece of property that will yield the gallonage based on the health department's sanitary flow standards, the gallonage per 40,000 square feet. That same property might yield 300 gallons of flow, but we would only give it half a credit, maybe,
Right.
for zoning purposes. So the certificates will, the allocation of the gallonage will be based on the health department's calculations, not based on what our zoning development right is worth. So
Right,
it's very,
it's sort of-
very important distinction.
And it's sort of getting into the concern that Tommy John had about pre-existing certificates. I don't want to be giving these people who are the certificate holders some additional value that they didn't have.
That's, yeah.
But you're going to
Well,
the board of
they-
review
it's not
and
like
they're
we're
the
giving
ones
it to them.
We're not
They,
giving them anything.
in our mind, they always had that. They always, even, the certificates even say they can be used for health department purposes. The code says that they can be.
And it's not we doing it,
Right.
it's the board of review that's
We're
doing
just
it.
trying to get our program that we currently do recognized by the health department. And so we have to add these certain parameters to our code that talk more specifically
Right.
about
Exactly
the
right.
credit, sanitary flow, because it's just our side, we're just talking zoning and development right globally. And this kind of gives it a little more calculated amounts to them. They still exist, they still are entitled to them. It's just that instead of going to the board of review one by one to prove your credit flow, the board of review, the health department is going to say, we approve your program, we
I get
understand
that.
what
I
you're
just want to
doing.
make sure we're not giving
We're not
them
giving anybody anything
anything
more than they
they
ever
already
had
have.
before.
Is there
That's
All
still
we're
residual
doing is
value?
just putting in language about sanitary flow credits that
in
will
our
be
code
added.
so that they'll recognize.
So they'll recognize it, that's pretty much it.
Oh.
It's very simple, and we're taking out, like, where we were reading the code, there was, again, we always find our plan development district language somewhere or another that we, so we cross that out wherever we see it when we come up,
Would
things
Can I
like
this
ask a
that.
help
question on
expedite our
value?
building permit process? in some
It
cases?
will, it will
Not
help the health
globally,
department
but for
process,
the-
which
Right.
expedites our building permit process.
That's, okay.
So when
yeah,
we send someone to the
yes.
health department, and then the health department goes, oh, no, you gotta go to the board of review, you just tack down like 4 to 6 months on them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they recognize our program, then they're good to
You
go,
don't
they
need
can
to
approve
worry.
it, then they can come back for their permit. So it does streamline things. Would you, agree?
Christine?
And there
Yeah,
may be
just on
some,
value, I'm just trying to understand it. So because the TDR generally, it's like the bundle of rights, right? So you're taking off the sanitary credits, but you can use it for other things like clearing, et cetera. Is there residual value in the development right or the land once the,
We've talked about this, but that's a literal nightmare for us to start like disaggregating a development
almost,
right
like,
and being like,
decreases
you
the
have this
value
much
of the
clearing and
development.
that much
We've
sanitary.
taken the position that there's a bundle of rights there, but
You
if you
use it for
choose to
one.
use it for a house, you can't use it for clearing also.
but the value of it remains the same, consistent in terms of its
There is
value?
an
Because
odd residual value that's recognized by, I think, the IRS, and because I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it surprised me that after all of this, there's still, you've stripped all the development rights, the fee still has some residual value when it's donated, that the IRS recognizes as a tax donation.
Yeah.
If that's what you're talking
It's
about, I
sort
don't
of, but
think
I'm
this would
also
affect
trying
it.
to like, it's odd that it's almost like we're just, if it's valued at X with all these things, we're taking it down.
No, we're
Or they're
not.
making we're not doing it, the person is choosing to
The
take it
person,
down.
it still has everything intact, so I'm,
there's still
Mrs. Jones, and
oversight
I
to it.
have a development right, and I wanna do, an accessory apartment and I need flow. I can cash it in for that reason. Or, I
then
want
you
to
lose
go
everything else
and
on
I
it.
want to transfer clearing rights. I can cash it in for that reason.
Or I want a carriage
I want
house.
a carriage house. I can cash it in for that reason.
you can't.
This is like literally a financial instrument. I can actually get a loan on it if I wanted to. So this, it's, as the person who owns this, there's more, you have all different
What
options.
you're saying is if you use it for the flow, you can't use it for the clearing.
You
There's no
cashed it
residual.
in. It's like you can't cash in a stock
Oh,
thing
oh.
twice or
Well,
something.
you can do portions of it. You can come and say, I want to use half of this
Yeah,
credit.
you can fractionally
I want to
cash
sell,
it in.
and then you have to go to Dave and you get a new stock certificate.
Then he gives you the rest, the residual as a certificate, so you
Applying
can
half
cash
of
that
it to
in.
some project and the remaining .2795
So if they
goes
use
out to
part
like
of
the
it for
8th decimal
clearing,
point.
does all of the flow remain on that certificate?
Let's say they use half of a,
6
let's say you
decimal
have a certificate for one full development, right? And it's good for 10,000 square feet of clearing. And it's good for 800 gallons of flow. And you want to you want to sell it to somebody who's going to, who needs the clearing, or half
The half
the
clearing.
amount of clearing. I would cut this in half. The original owner keeps one half and keeps one half of the clearing rights, one half of the sewage flow, and the new owner gets to use theirs for sewage flow or for clearing or whatever.
So somewhere there's a ledger that Dave is keeping.
Well, the certificates
Should have safe.
themselves are the ledger.
Yeah, the
Um,
certificates tell you how much, and then when you cash them in, he voids them out and gives you a new one, or they're voided out, and then it's
We do
gone.
this a lot.
So.
So don't
we-
lose your certificate?
And it's
we
only.
No, and I have some
Forward.
people that have called me and said they can't find their certificates, so.
But
And
there's
we
got to be a
also
way of
allow-
replacing a certificate.
Yeah,
so-
I mean, we can issue a new one if somebody comes in
Cancel
10 years from
one.
now with another one, and we'll say, well, wait a minute.
This was canceled out. That's
That
why you
was-
have to have that ledger, that book.
Right.
That somewhere that says, no, this is a canceled certificate.
If a new one is issued, if one is
Right,
lost, that's a different,
then
that's a different
the
issue.
ledger would say the original was lost and we don't have.
No,
like a
so what
stock
I, so
certificate.
what I was getting
Yeah,
at, if you use
exactly.
it for the clearing, right, you lose the flow. If you cash it
It
into the
depends
clearing.
on how,
If you
yes.
use it for half the clearing, you can then still use it for all of the flow.
No.
No,
No,
You would only be able to use
No,
it for
only
half of the
that,
flow.
only
Yeah.
that portion. Think of it
The
as a dollar
clearing is
bill.
like,
so
almost
they
like you're
stay together.
taking
Yeah.
land off the top. When you clear, you're taking flow, because that's development
Okay.
to some extent. You know what I mean? Like, that is considered, your clearing rights are part of
Makes
your
sense,
development
yep.
right.
You could use it simultaneously for sewage flow and zoning purposes.
but for half the amount.
It's a
You just
bowl
can't
of
count it
currency and
twice.
you're taking
Yes,
from it.
you can't
That's-
double dip, you can't count it twice. Dave does a really good job of keeping track of it all. And all we're asking for here is just to put the word sanitary flow credit into our law so that the health
Simplify the
department
process.
recognizes this and doesn't keep sending everybody to the board of review.
Is the county required to review this? I'm sure they are.
Yes.
How is the
Yeah.
county
And that's
required to
gonna be
review
the
this?
next step.
Okay.
And-
If you're okay with doing this, and
I am okay
I'll
with
give you a
doing
few
this.
weeks to read it if you have questions.
Mm-hmm.
But the next step would be to send this to Health Department. If they sign off on it, we come back here and do a public hearing.
I just want to make the
It's a
board aware
no-brainer.
that not all Southampton town development rights are of equal value. So depending on what school district you're in, can change the value
Right.
Sure.
of the, so there's limitations that you might have to use a right within a particular school district in some school districts.
Yes, none of that's changing.
Yeah,
Our,
all
our
that's-
process, our procedures, nothing is changing in our codes, other than the fact that we are formally specifying that these certificates are good for sanitary flow.
Do they do the same thing on the county end, where they require that the flow stay within the same school district?
No.
No.
Can I
We have
ask-
people in like Brookhaven will ask us if you can take their, use a or a Pine Barren credit, or they'll want to transfer
county.
this flow rights to
Mm,
elsewhere.
through
We're
the
always like,
county.
sure, because that's, the name of the game is to, first and foremost, expire the credits out of the core. We want to use them all up, right? That's our mandate under the Pine Barrens Act. And then transfer development rights where people have certificates for lands that are like otherwise undeveloped, they're environmentally sensitive, they're an old filed map, there are areas where we wanna shift the density away from those areas and preserve them. And that's a good thing. It's a very good program.
This goes kind of before Councilwoman McNamara and Martell, but years ago, we stripped development rights off of the Conklin property out in North Sea. I want to say 15, or 50, I think it was 15 rights.
15.1.
And I think maybe 3 of them or so was for CPF or something, or a third of them. And the rest was for affordable housing
Mhm.
and to reimburse. And we were gonna sell those. And I know people have been buying within the Southampton School District credits at like over $200,000 of credit.
Mhm.
And the idea was basically to monetize those credits and use it for affordable housing purposes.
Mhm.
But I don't think you've sold any of them.
We haven't, well, I just sent an attorney to Jim, and I told them they were gonna buy it on the private market. I told them the town has some for sale, and they've decided they wanna make an offer to the town, so.
Oh, good. I know we had them
There should be
appraised,
one
though.
coming very soon to Jim.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
what happens when
let's
someone
get rid of them.
borrows against
I
these?
have no idea.
Okay.
But should we do a better job in marketing the fact that we have Southampton
there's
School
a-
District unencumbered credits for sale? Or-
I mean, I mention it to all the attorneys all the time, but if there's
Okay.
some way we can
Well,
do
you
a
know,
press
Pond
release
Barrens has a
or.
clearinghouse, right? And so you can go on their website and look up a clearinghouse. Eventually, as we get more digitally
but we
savvy,
won't accept
we
that,
may.
right? If it's outside of the Southampton School District, you still,
No, I'm saying, I'm just saying,
They
in
have
terms
that.
of
We don't.
advertising, we could eventually, and I'm not volunteering this now, but we could create like some type of clearinghouse where people can then see the
Well-
credits and see everything that is all.
it seems to me
on the
We
that,
need an exchange.
right, so when somebody comes in,
Yeah, it's like a
State
commodity.
somebody
exchange.
comes in
Yes.
to do a development project, somewhere, somebody is gonna tell them, yeah, you need a Southampton School District credit to make this happen, so you can put that tennis court in, or whatever it is, or, so you can do that additional clearing. And somebody in the building department ought to be able to say to that applicant, well, when they say, where do I get them? You know, that Joe Gaza is not the only one who has these credits, that,
Well, that's why Dave's
We
our
have
development
some
right
too.
manager, and everybody knows to send people to Dave.
Yeah, I always tell people, if they're in the Southampton School District and they call me and they say, where can I find Southampton rights? I first off say the town has them, but then I also give them a list of
other people,
other
right,
people, yeah.
right, and, I mean, we should be able to sell ours at a competitive price. So, and if we sell 10 credits at whatever, 200,000, whatever, you know, that's $2 million that would go toward affordable housing. And I know we're gonna have a fund soon, and we'll have some money there, but it could, you know, it wouldn't hurt to have that additional money, and particularly reimburse the town, because we bought that Conklin property to do affordable housing.
Right.
And we used money, I don't think it was specific to affordable housing, but we took money out of the general fund.
Well,
To do that.
there was CPF money and there was community housing
Housing
fund
fund
money.
money.
Those were the two
We
funds.
didn't have the community, oh, I guess we called it something.
We had some.
We had a
It came out
special
of, it
fund.
came out of a
Yeah,
community housing.
there's a
development.
fund for,
We have
We have it, but it was
We do.
different than the new tax.
it was different than the
Yeah.
new tax, yes.
Right.
So we want to keep that segregated, because, you know, there might be restrictions on the new tax money versus our own community housing fund.
Mhm.
All right, I'm just saying, try to get those sold. That's my point.
Yeah, you know, there's not a lot of market in these things. There aren't a lot that are being bought and sold, but I do tell people all the time, we have rights.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Dave?
All right, then we'll send this off to the health department. Hopefully they'll approve it.
Well, we have to do a resolution first, don't we?
No,
No,
well,
no,
this
no.
Oh, you
originated
wanna make
from
sure
us
they're
sitting
got it.
down
Yeah,
with
that's
them and
all
asking
accepted
them what we
first.
needed to do. And they
And-
told us what we needed to do, and then
This
we
is
did it, and we're
stage
showing
2
you.
of 3.
Now we're gonna go back
If
to
they
them
say
and
this is-
say,
yeah, this is good for us,
then we're gonna
then
schedule,
we're
you'll
gonna-
see it on the agenda scheduled for a public hearing.
Perfect, got it, all right, appreciate it.
Or if they say, no, you gotta change this, we don't like this, we're not gonna approve this, we'll make some more changes.
Or
and
they'll
come
say,
back to
we'll
you.
let you know in a year and a half, which is also possible.
We're pretty confident we've got it right. This is pretty much what mirrors the other towns.
I'm just talking about the workload in the county right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need eventually they have to recognize our program, and if they make some change after the public hearing, we'll deal with that, but we feel good that, you know, we kind of
It's pretty
down the
straightforward.
path they told us to go on, so
Yeah.
it shouldn't be too different. So,
Thank you.
I'm good,
That's it.
thanks.
for me. Nice,
Run like the wind.
Okay, so next up is Sandra. Why don't we take a couple minutes? You gonna be a couple minutes?
Well, I just called her and told her to come on down, so,
Okay.
Be right back.
I thought we,
Yeah, so we're all sort of spreading out, so let's take a 2-minute recess. 2-minute recess. Schedule changes for 2023. We are joined by Sandra Cercioni, Director of Human Resources. Do I say the last name correctly?
Cirincione.
Cercioni.
Yeah.
What did I say?
It's close.
Close.
It's a lot of
Cercioni.
syllables.
It's not Cercione, it's Cercioni.
it's the way it's spelled.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to come and speak to you today, just briefly to remind you that when we extended the CSEA contract this year out to 2025, one of the other elements in the contract was a reduction in the civilian employees' work week from 42 and a half hours to 40 hours. So that passed. That's been extended out to all the civilian employees.
Starting January 1.
Starting January 1. And right now, we're in the process of getting the new schedules from the department heads as to when they're employed, because their day's going to end a half hour early. They can't all go home at the same time. So we've asked them to give us new schedules. They were given some directions of parameters that no one can start on a regular basis earlier than 6, and no one can end their day on a regular basis earlier than 2. And most of them seem to be working okay with those guidelines. We told them that it was not our intention for town facility hours to change. And for the most part, they're not. So town hall is going to continue to be open its regular hours, the CPF office, the police department, the justice court, their regular hours to the public will not change. When I asked the department heads for scheduling, though, I said to them, if there's something specific about your operation that makes maintaining the scheduled hours the same as your employees' work week shortens, please bring it to my attention, and I'll, review it with you and then review it with the board. And there were 3 departments that asked to modify their facility hours to the public due to either their operation or the nature of their scheduling. And they were waste management, and that's for the transfer stations, the senior centers, and the Hampton Bays Water District. So I've reviewed what they put forth. I think it's all reasonable, but obviously you guys are the ones who have to be comfortable with this. So starting with waste management, they currently have their staff work from 7:45 to 4:15, and that gives them a 15-minute cushion at the start and the end of the day to prep and then on prep.
So the transfer station itself is open
from
8
to 4. Right. So now they are looking to have, so they're switching from 7:45 to 4:15 and facility hours of 8 to 4 to 8:15 to 4:15 as the employee hours and 8:30 to 4 as the facility hours. So the transfer station would actually close the same time it presently does, open a half hour later.
So instead of opening at 8, it would open at 8:30?
Yes.
In the morning.
And the staff, same thing, would be there 15 minutes before it opens and 15 minutes after it
Do
closes.
we know in terms of public use, is that a big hour, 8 o'clock?
Tom actually asked the CRC to put a survey on the town's Facebook page. And he said they got 150 respondents, and to him, the overwhelming response was to prefer an 8:30 to 4 p.m. schedule rather than opening later and closing later. So it seemed to them that the morning hours, the ability to go, somewhere before 9 a.m. was important. So he has put forth the request that the hours go the public hours go from 8 to 4 to 8:30 to 4. He also has a complex.
So the public survey said what they'd rather, it would be 8:30 to 4.
Rather than say 9 to
4:30.
or 9:30 to 5.
Okay.
They
I
preferred the
would,
earlier hours.
at least in West Hampton Beach, I would totally agree with that. The morning
Okay.
hours are,
They
I mean,
like
that-
the morning hours, but so it would reduce the morning hours by
Yeah.
half
And
an
the,
hour.
Yeah,
and
but
the
that's
ending hours would stay the
better than
same.
9,
So
when
that
most
would be
people can be at
unchanged,
work.
so everyone knows the transfer station closes at 4, and they would still know the transfer station closes at 4. It's, because it's a 7-day-a-week operation and it's staffed pretty leanly, attempting to stagger the schedules in order to keep the hours the same would be really difficult. And it would also complicate the scale process at the end of the day, because the scale has to close, it has to be counted, it has to be reconciled, and then someone goes and does a deposit. So,
I'm okay with that one.
Okay.
So, but you guys,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
everybody okay? I don't think it's a great inconvenience to the public.
No, but it'll be a little rough start because most people won't know that.
Well, part of,
You get to
bringing
Renee.
this to your attention now is so we can
Right.
start publicizing it a little bit in
Yeah.
advance.
Can I ask, are these hours of operation set by the town board? Is it in the budget? Is it in the code?
I know, I don't know if you guys put hours.
I don't remember ever seeing the hours of operation codified anywhere. That's why I'm asking.
I can't recall them ever being codified anywhere either. They're always, they've always been these hours for as long as I've been
It's
here. as both a
ministerial.
resident and a,
Right.
yeah, we close one of them on Wednesdays, the Sag
when
Harbor
we-
Transfer Station.
And
So I don't remember if that
West
was.
Hampton closes on Wednesday.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was done by resolution either.
And the reason why I'm asking is in terms of effectuating this change, and we should do some public notice, we're not amending a section of code here, right?
No.
Because it doesn't somewhere say that the transfer station shall be open from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4 PM.
Not to my
So-
knowledge.
So once
I'll
we have
confirm
this
it, but-
discussion at work session, it's really just advisory to the department head, which is Tom, and he will then take care of that.
Yeah,
So
and
we're not
then-
gonna see a resolution that comes out of this conversation.
No. This is just
I think it's
notice in
discretionary
case
to
you
the
guys get
department.
inquiries, hey, what happened to the hours? And once this is done, I would imagine that all these department heads will be reaching out to the CRC about getting signage, about getting the information on the website, so people do have some, some people are gonna miss it, but we'll
Right.
try to push out the information as early as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so the next person on the list who asked for the hours to
Could I
change.
just add one thing to that? It should include signage at the sites as well.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think people are, since COVID, people are used to seeing signs at least
Yeah,
the transfer station.
that's where most people will get their information
Okay.
Yeah, the people who use it.
from. Yeah.
Okay. The senior centers have asked if they can change their current hours of being open to seniors are 8:30 to 4. And Laura Pettit, the director, and Kara, it supports Laura's suggestion, is that we modify the hours to 8:30 to 3:30. There's a number of reasons for that. One is that they have multiple facilities, and at least one facility, there's only one staff person. Actually, at two facilities, there's only one staff person, Flanders and at Bridgehampton. So that person would have to stay later. We'd have to basically give them overtime every day to close at the regular hours. They studied their traffic flow as well, and Laura said when the center opens in the morning, there's usually, 10 seniors waiting outside to get in. At the end of the day, there's one guy typically on the computer in the library. So they think that definitely for the patterns of their usage, their patronage would prefer to be there, to have their morning hours stay the same. And she said usually between meals and programming, the seniors are usually out of the building by 2 or 2:30. We just don't close until 4 in case someone's in the library.
What I understand, there's a pretty serious canasta game,
It's very possible.
Is it possible
but this gives them
because-
enough time in the afternoon to, they're
But
done.
is it possible because
Oh,
there's
yeah.
more staffing at Hampton Bays to keep the Hampton Bays Center open from 8:30 to 4?
According to what Laura said, there's not a need.
Okay.
The people just aren't there other than this one guy. And yeah, it's unfortunate he obviously relies on using the computer, but he could go up the road to the Hampton Bays Library and perhaps use the computer. She said the majority of their patrons are pretty much out by 2:30.
Okay.
So if you guys are okay with closing the senior centers at, their new hours starting January would be 8:30 to 3:30, and that would be at all of the centers. Flanders, Hampton Bays,
I'm fine with that.
Bridgehampton. Okay, thank you.
It's our nutrition program, basically, you're talking about. They're done with
Yeah.
lunch. They're
Yeah, and if they, if they've done their
They-
carryover
well,
or
they
their
have
bingo
other-
or
they have
whatever.
carbs.
around by 3, so.
Yeah, the meals and the programs, for the most
Are
part, are done by 2:30, 3 o'clock. And she says that's really when their foot traffic disappears as well.
Okay.
So the last department that asked if they could change their hours was the Hampton Bays Water District. So they're currently open between 8 and 4, from 8 to 4. I think it's 8 to 4. No, I apologize, it might be 7:30 to,
Yeah, I think it's from 7,
okay.
which is so early,
Their hours right now are currently 7:30 to 4.
7:30.
They would like to make them 7:30 to 3:30. They also basically said they get little to no foot traffic between the last half hour of the day. They have someone on call 24/7 because of water emergencies. So if there was a need at the office between 3:30 and 4, there's a person who could be reached. And it would really be the administrative staff, almost primarily sitting there by themselves. And, you know, if they don't have the traffic, they would rather not, you know, ask that one staff person to stay. It's not like they have
So
multiple people
this
that
is
they can
obviously our only
stagger.
water district. I don't.
So, yeah, I guess this
live
is a
there.
water district.
I
board
use Suffolk County
question.
Water Authority for my water. The number of times I've gone to their administrative offices are 0. So.
Same here, Jay.
I mean, and I think that Hampton Bays Water District should do more remotely. Personally, I think they should use auto pay. You know, why people are going to the office with their check to pay their water bills, but people do. But I really think that the functions there are limited, as long as they're on call and a reasonable hours. Would I prefer it to be like 8 to 4? Sure. They want to be 7:30 to 3?
Right now, they're 7:30 to 4, and they would like it to be 7:30 to 3:30.
To 3:30. I mean, it's fine.
Fine with that.
There are quite a few people who take that walk and drop off their
They do
their checks,
so-
but it's the middle of the day. I don't think
Yeah.
the half hour makes a difference.
But I mean, I always do see people there going in. It's like Terry would always say to us, you know, there are some people who just like to come in and hand in their tax payment. And sure enough, you see them coming in and asking, you know,
There ought
where's
to
the
be a little
receiver's office?
slot that if they get there at 5, they stick it in the mail slot.
I mean, I think the functionality would be great to say, hey, if you want to pay this bill online, you never have to go to the water
All right,
district.
and what's a quarterly bill? Is that?
People like
is it-
to
No,
do
but these
it.
people, even though they're paying by check, they want
They
their
do.
receipt.
Some of them
They
do.
want, you know,
And-
they
and
want their-
frankly,
You know, maybe
It's a
you're not
quarterly
working or
bill.
you're a retiree, it's one of the things.
They
you
want
do
to talk to the
during rest
ladies
of
in the
day.
office.
And if you cut it back a half
They
an
can
hour,
do that,
then
but-
It's good to see the
people
tank.
will not come
close.
that second, you
Really
know,
does.
it's just.
Yeah.
These are also the
Flexible hours
employees in the
is-
field too, we're talking about.
Everyone's
This
out, yeah,
office.
but this, so everyone's hours are changing.
Mhm.
The employees in the field may not have the 7:30 to 3:30 hours, they may have, you typically will have earlier hours. But these are the office and the office staff
Okay.
hours.
I mean, it is odd that they're open to the public at 7:30 in the morning. Like, who goes to an office, a business office at 7:30 in the morning?
Stranger
well-
things, you know, our CPF
Well.
office in the summertime used to be open at, I think, like 5 in the morning.
Yeah, so my
I mean, strange
preference,
things have happened over
my
time, I don't know.
preference would be to move it
Later.
later, not,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
or standardize it.
I would prefer that. Do I think it's gonna make any difference? Not really. Because I really don't think people need to have so much access to their office. So as long as they're open for a few hours a day, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the guys in the office start at, outside in the field start at 6 a.m., so
6 or
if there's any
6:30.
back and forth to the office, to be there at 7:30 seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Why do they start at 6? Because of traffic, because of, they have other jobs?
No, most of our blue-collar employees, and that's parks maintenance, highway trustees,
Start
maintenance, and the water district staff, they all start, usually it's 6:30 in the winter and 6 in the season. This change will probably have most of them starting at 6 a.m., because we won't let them start earlier than 6 a.m.
Well, they're not proposing
You're
to
back.
leave earlier. They're not proposing to start any earlier. Right? It's the same start time, right?
Yes,
7:30.
same start time, 7:30 to
So
3:30.
this change will basically cut half an hour off the end of their day.
Right, so for whatever reason, the transfer station patrons were okay with cutting off a half hour at the start of their day and leaving their end time be the same. This time it's opposite, they're leaving their start time the same, and they're changing their end of the day schedule. They say that they've studied their patronage and that follows the pattern of when they get their visitors, and they think it would be the least convenient way to them to adjust the schedule.
All right, and it's,
So I give these credits unit in that they
I
all
don't-
kind
I
of tried
don't
to look
love
at
it.
data
I'm
to
okay
ask
with
these
it. So,
requests.
where's the board? Everybody okay with
Fine.
it?
Yeah, it's all right.
We're doing this as water commissioners of the Hampton Bays Water District, and those employees are under the same bargaining agreement as the CSEA employees in Southampton Town.
They are, yes.
Okay.
So-
Okay, yeah, I'm
I'm
sorry, I
okay.
should have understood that you
No, no,
guys wore
that's, I
different
just
hats
felt
for
it
that
needed to be
office.
said for
So,
some
all
reason.
right, so everybody's okay with those 3 changes?
Okay, so I'm gonna inform the department heads, I'm sure they'll be
Is it
appreciative.
going, although only 3 requested this, hearing of these changes? Do you think we're gonna see other departments now go, hey, we wanna change ours?
No, because they already gave you their hours.
It
and
was
they-
right in the email that I sent them, that said,
Okay.
if you think you have a need to change them, come to me and let me know.
Okay.
Actually, one other office asked if they could modify their hours, and that was the Justice Court. And I actually told them that I did not think that a change to the Justice
No, I
Court
agree
hours
with
would
that.
be
No, no, I
advisable.
can't do that.
And Jackie understood that and said, okay, I'll work with the present hours. So,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Samuel.
Can I just ask, and this is about, whether it's for you or for Janice, those negotiations, that wasn't the only change in the negotiations, the work week. We also added Juneteenth.
We
I want to
did.
make sure that our holiday schedule that we put out in January includes Juneteenth
It-
now as a holiday.
Yeah, it's already been circulated and it's,
Oh, we approved it already, yeah.
payroll
Okay.
does it, it's already been circulated, along with the other changes, like the New Year's Eve holiday goes away, and that has come off the
Right,
schedule.
election day goes away.
Election day also come off the schedule.
And
we
full day on
on
New Year's Eve.
Right, and all of those changes have also been put into Nova time, so
Right.
we'll remind employees as we go.
Was that, those are the only changes? Election day, New Year's Eve was a half day, becomes not a day off.
Yeah,
right?
that's a full work day
And,
now.
and Juneteenth was added.
Was added,
That's
yeah.
it, in terms of holiday
The only
changes?
holiday changes there were.
Okay. Good Friday's the same, everything else is the same. Okay.
All righty?
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Samuel.
All right, we're gonna switch to parking, I think.
Yep.
Beach Parking Management Project, we are joined by our Parks Director, Kristen Dulos, and Jerry Giosa, from Level G Associates. So, come on up. Okay. All right, so Kristen, do you want, nice to see you.
Nice to see you guys.
Think you wanna introduce this?
Sure. The purpose of us coming here today is to give a progress report on our parking management plan that we've been working on since around this time last year.
One more?
You got, no, you're good.
Just one. Yeah. Just take one.
So we wanted to just give you guys an update as we're heading into the new year to let you know where we are in the project and what we think the 2023 beach season is going to look like in terms of how we're going to sell permits and where we're heading into the future with it. So today we have Jerry Giosa from Level G Consulting with us. We have a PowerPoint presentation, so I think that will explain a lot of what we want to convey here. And Jerry, do you want to
Sure,
say something?
sure. Yeah, so we're here to update you on the parking program. We did, and I'm just going to go through, going to recap the goals and objectives of the program. It's basically to improve operating efficiency and customer choices and experiences, and using parking technologies to improve the parking experience. Streamline management of all parking facilities using back office function and reporting tools. So now, all the information is gathered digitally, and we can, we can open reports using software, with different permissions that can, it's a very powerful kind of management tool. Reduce congestion and backups by eliminating entrance booth transactions. That's something that's not imminent. We're going to be testing at Tiana this summer. Create a safer and less stressful environment for beach attendants by eliminating on-site cash handling. Streamline and modernize the enforcement of parking regulations using license plate reader technology, and to improve the financial performance of the parking system. And we sell, how many permits a year? 50,000?
Close to 50,000.
Does that include the daily permits? or the-
Yes, yeah, it's about 25,000 full season permits. That's the resident and non-resident combined, and about 15,000 daily permits.
So there's a.
It's a lot of volume.
Yep, it's a lot of volume, and this will help us manage it all in a much more efficient fashion. So the project consists of a virtual parking permit management system, and basically this is replacing the stickers with vehicle license plates. So the license plate is tied into your purchase of a sticker or a permit. Again, the license plate readers are used to enforce and to check that you have a valid permit. Handheld ticket writers, which have already been deployed, and I'll report on that in a little bit. Citation management and fine collection systems, which is inherent and all integrated with all this technology.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we had initially embarked upon this project sort of as a beach parking solution, but as we went along, we incorporated the police department and justice court into the project. So they've already, and Jerry will get into it more in the presentation, but they've already begun with some of the citation management and handheld license plate readers.
It's just for the parking or?
No, they use it for everywhere for parking tickets right now.
And the last time I was before you, we were talking about having barrier gates at the beaches that would be activated by the license plate readers. But since then, we've migrated to a gateless solution because we were doing additional research. We found that there could be mechanical issues with the gates, and we would still have the backups. But now we have a solution where we have the license plate readers that are going to record all the plates coming through, and we conduct intelligent enforcement. So if we notice a number of unauthorized plates coming through, Carl's going to have that data on the enforcement end, and he can dispatch vehicles in that fashion. So,
And I understand he's pretty excited about this. It's work, right?
They've already
Yeah.
begun
Gotten that
using the
feedback.
technology,
Yeah.
and we have some updates on how that's working for
Okay,
them.
great.
Yep. So again, the central management back office functions, we had a turnkey delivery by one vendor where all this technology is coordinated and everything kind of happens in real time. So if I purchase a permit online, my license plate is immediately uploaded into the enforcement function, into the handheld units that are out in the field. So it's all coordinated and integrated, and it's happening successfully today. Due to the range and complexity of this program, the town thought it best to deploy the program in a series of logical incremental steps, and that's where we are. We're just at the end of phase 1 now, so that's why we're here to update you. And there have been a number of departments engaged in this effort, including, of course, headed by Kristen, Parks and Rec. That's been the police department, IT, justice court, and the finance department. So the procurement was back in January of 2022. We received proposals in February. We did a detailed review of the submissions, and the contract was awarded to Passport Labs, which is a nationwide firm that specializes in the development of these systems. They have 70 clients in New York State, including Buffalo, Albany, White Plains, and on Long Island, Huntington. So what's different from today from when we last were before you is the gateless system, which I just described. We've gone from a gated solution to a gateless solution. And the second is the pay stations were eliminated. We were going to go with pay stations where you would enter your license plate number and then pay with either cash or a credit card at a machine. But now, with the success of the pay by app in Sag Harbor and in East Hampton, we've decided to give it a try.
So it's like a QR code they scan and it brings up the app and they put in their information right there.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Are you
all
referring to the parking program in Sag Harbor, or the
Excuse
beach?
me?
Are you referring to the parking program that they have in Sag Harbor, or their beach permits?
Well, I think they do both in East Hampton with it, but I'm not sure about Sag Harbor specifically.
Okay, I thought you said.
Yeah, East Hampton Village is using it for their municipal lots and beach parking lots.
Okay.
They use a pay-by app, and they're using virtual permits only. They don't issue physical permits anymore, and they have the vehicle-mounted LPRs that are scanning
Go and
all those
check.
locations.
But for somebody who's a resident, they're just, instead of buying the decal now, you pay your $40, $50 and you're in the system and then you can come and go freely, right? You won't get charged when you go to the beaches.
Yes,
It'll
correct.
recognize your license plate as one that has a permit.
Yeah, exactly.
How far in advance can you pay on the app? Can you pay on Tuesday for Saturday?
You can adjust it to however you want it to be. I would anticipate wanting to do it when they get into that zone. So at that beach location is when they would be able to do it, yeah. I mean, we'll have to, you know,
It's quick. It's surprising.
I'm just worried about over-reserving on a beginning of the week or somebody that does it on a regular
Yeah.
basis, you know?
yeah, I would want to make it, at least to begin with, where they have to be at the location. Because I think we would probably preload a certain amount of daily spots based on what we know that beach can typically accommodate. And then have someone on site that would kind of monitor it. And if it's filling up, let's say, by 11 o'clock with residents and we know we're going to be out of dailies, you know, we could go into that back end very easily and adjust that number so that it's showing up as
So
no
when they get there,
availability.
is it their license plate that lets them in, or do they get another QR code that gets scanned there?
So there's a 20-minute grace period, so that if you're just driving to the beach and you're gonna drop someone off, you know, you can go in and out without having to pay. But anytime during that 20-minute period is when you can pay with the app.
Right.
And then because your ticket wouldn't, your plate wouldn't go to a violation unless you're there for 20 minutes without.
21 minutes.
But it's not
So you
automated.
could just leave it where you wouldn't reserve a spot, you could just, you go there and if there's a spot, then you pay.
That's what.
That's what it should be, right?
That's
You
what
shouldn't-
allows.
You shouldn't be able to prepay
That's-
and then
that's-
hope there's a spot.
Right, we don't want them to be able
Yeah.
to prepay.
That's what
Yeah.
we're doing.
Okay.
Yes.
Pay there.
That makes a lot more sense.
You can go there and go, I
Find
want
a spot
to
and then
It's
pay.
not
Yeah.
automated
But
ticketing.
sometimes we do like to hold vacant
Well, it's-
spots for residents if a beach is getting filled up. So even though there might be vacant spots, we may put on the app that there are none available,
So
depending on the
so it's-
beach and the volume.
It's not automated ticketing, right? You still need a police officer to go there and put the ticket on the car, right? So if I go, not me, but somebody goes in who's not a town resident, whatever, and goes, parks there and doesn't do the QR code, and leaves 20 minutes later, he's not automatically gonna get a ticket. He'll know he got a ticket because the police officer showed up. And
This year, correct.
this year, what,
We might get into some automated invoicing by mail in the future. We're gonna get into that in a little bit.
all right, that makes me a little nervous. but-
Okay, but we're not there yet this year. This year, what we're piloting is the pay-by app and the license plate readers at Tiana.
It'll just be a Tiana only, that's the only location.
Right,
That's
but
the
the
pilot.
violations would be issued, though, by a police officer.
Correct.
Who has the data, knows that that car did not pay.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
people could conceivably go park, jump in the ocean, come back before a police officer comes.
Right.
Within 20 minutes? Yeah.
Well, they do that now.
No, I know this.
Well, the other thing,
You know, but
the other safety
if
net
there's no police officer,
this
that's-
year is that we're still gonna be issuing physical permits in tandem with this. So we're still gonna have
We'll see.
attendants at the beach, checking people as they come through.
Okay. right.
So people won't
This
just be
is
like,
the
it's a
learning
free-for-all
curve.
at Tiana this year.
Well, that's
That's why we're doing this, right? I understand.
Yeah, so
You
that's.
sort of need
the-
to anyway, because we're only doing it at Tiana. So if, I mean, there might be people, that's the only beach they ever go to, but they might go to Ponquag sometimes. They're gonna need that sticker for all the other beaches anyway.
Well,
Yeah,
it's being-
yeah.
it's being continued for
exactly. We're
2023.
doing them at the same, so both programs will be running at the same time. So we're gonna have everybody purchase their permits through this passport software, where we'll have the license plates captured so that the police can start piloting this equipment in various locations, making sure that it's working, proof of concept. And then at Tiana, we'll actually have the pole-mounted cameras as well at the entrance and exit, starting to pilot that equipment.
Going back to ticketing, and particularly automated ticketing, the ticket revenues are 100% to the town, not to the vendor, or are they getting a piece of that?
There's a service fee that is on top of what you pay for your ticket.
Paid by the.
That
Yes.
is paid by the person who received the ticket.
And that goes to the vendor?
Yes.
All right,
How would we handle-
I get concerned about like a predatory type of system where somebody, once you automate it.
Well,
it might- you know,
Well,
it's-
it's supposed to be revenue It's supposed to adjust
I
with
know.
the change in revenue.
I know.
Well, what we're discussing is something similar to tolls by mail that they have now at all the bridge and tunnel crossings. So if you leave without using the app, you'll be sent an invoice in the mail, similar to the tolls and the bridges. So it's a non-punitive, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be charged more than, I mean, there might be a service fee.
On top of what you would have had to pay to park there.
Correct, it would be, you'd be sent the $30 daily parking invoice to pay
Okay,
within
plus a
30 days.
small administrative fee
Yes.
because you didn't use the app.
Correct.
I'm okay with that.
Yep.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah,
hopefully
I'm
doing
not
in the
okay
future.
with the $30 to park plus an additional $250.
Yeah.
Will
No,
people still
I'm
be able
with you
to come to your
on that,
office?
definitely.
Or do it by mail?
So
The
for
public hates that kind of.
for
thing.
this season, in the past we've sold the permits at all the beach locations once like Memorial Day hits. This season, what we're looking to do is not sell any of the full season permits at the beaches, but we would still sell them at like 4 satellite locations throughout the town. So people, yes, can still get them in person. We've done away by the in-mail the past 2 seasons, but they could either get it online or in person at one of these 4 satellite locations. This will ensure that we can enter everything through the Passport software, because we wouldn't be able to do that remotely at the beach locations. And it starts getting the public used to moving towards this new technology. And it takes all that cash out of the beaches and,
Well, what I'm saying is when you go fully online with this, will people still have an option to come and pay?
they
and-
can.
Okay.
We'll have to decide.
Because there
what
are
we-
some people that are not gonna wanna put an app on, they're not, you know what I mean, they're just gonna wanna get their permit like they've always gotten. their
Yeah,
permit.
I realize that's gonna be, a bit of a growing pain, and East Hampton Village only does it online now.
Okay.
But the upside is that you're gonna have these satellite locations where you can get your ticket, at least for
Yeah.
next year.
We're gonna do that for now, yeah, and
Which
then
it's
we can
exciting to
assess-
people that I talk to about that, because normally, like anyone in the western part of the town, they have to go to Hampton Bays and, all that kind of thing, so.
Yeah.
This was what we asked for, was the ease in approach, step by step, phase it,
Yeah.
Right.
so people get that,
I think
learn as
everyone
we
has to
learn.
go to Hampton Bays, right? I mean, we don't sell them here at Town Hall.
Right,
Well,
well,
we sell at the beach.
we used
We
to
sell
sell
the
out of
beach.
town hall, but during COVID, it wasn't really possible.
But you will
So,
have a site east of the canal.
yes, we'll have 2 sites east of the canal.
Yeah.
Bridgehampton, we're thinking Conscience Point Marina in North Sea.
That's not that accessible to people.
Then it would have to be town hall. The reason why we like Conscience Point is because the weekends would be easier
I
there,
would
whereas
say-
here, because we
I mean,
need to have
Town
it.
Hall and, trying to think of something further east.
Bridgehampton Senior Center, we're gonna
Mhm.
sell out of.
There it is.
That's
Okay.
it,
That's
perfect.
It's our only facility. The Noyak Schoolhouse.
That was another thought I had, but doesn't have
know.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Bridgehampton Senior would be.
And then
okay.
in the west,
The
West
west,
Hampton Beach, the library, that's still,
we don't have confirmation from them yet, but
Okay.
we're in talks with them.
okay.
And then you
and-
could sell them out of a transfer station or something like that.
And how are we handling our volunteer first responders who get beach stickers from the town?
They still
I-
have to come in person to get their permit.
Okay, and as this program
Or online,
progresses.
I'm sorry, or online they can do it.
Okay,
Actually, yes.
You-
So
you've
they
got
could
it
do
figured
either way.
out,
They used to not
they
be able to
know.
do it at the beaches, but they would probably have to do it at our office, actually, because we have a log of all their rosters there. So we would probably still have them come to the Red Barn, as we always have in the past, or they could do it online.
and the chiefs are involved in that.
Yes,
Okay.
the chiefs send us their rosters each year.
So, I'm just thinking, if we did the Bridgehampton Senior Center, you have to put a Parks employee there just to do this.
Yes.
Whereas you
Any
already
place.
have an employee at Conscience Point. So,
We would probably have different staff doing it there anyway, but Conscience Point, it's hardwired to the town server already, there's Wi-Fi there, there's an office there, and there's parking there.
It's just,
And there's
I mean, if you have it at Town Hall,
security.
I think that sort of serves this Southampton area.
The only challenge with that was on the weekends. You guys typically have security here during operating hours. On the weekends, that's not.
Well, we have it all the time.
Well, I'll leave it to you to
So-
figure it out,
Yeah.
Right.
how to best serve the public there. Because, I mean, it is a big change. People used to going down to the beaches and getting it
Yes, it's going to be a
at
big
the
change.
beach.
Mhm.
Well, the
When you
online
say
works
Conscious
great.
Point, they gotta go, huh?
I think the
It's really
majority
not
of
that
people are
far
just gonna
from
go
here.
Yeah.
And there are people that still come here and wonder why we don't have our beach stickers at town hall.
Well, maybe what we could do is sell it here. I mean, I don't want to mix people up with too many different.
So then there will be actual
locations, but-
stickers this coming year?
Yes.
Yes.
It will be.
Yeah,
It will be.
will be on both systems.
But
this
it'll
year.
still be
It'll
the
be
virtual
safety
permit
net.
system, but you'll still get an actual permit as well.
Yes.
Well, no, the older virtual one will only be at 10.
Well, everybody will be in the virtual system though, so
Yeah,
that
everybody's
if the
cars have to
police
be.
are driving around, they could still test the equipment. But we've already spoken with Carl. They'll do a visual inspection for a physical permit. If
That allows you
if
to
a
go
plate
to
comes
another
up as
beach.
unpermitted, they'll still look for. The other thing is the trustees have parking permits as well, so they're gonna have to look for that trustee parking permit right now too. In the future, we're hoping the trustees will come into the system as well.
And then you'll be able to see every permit that they have.
They were involved in our initial conversations,
Well,
and they
we've-
seemed
yeah.
interested.
We hope to.
Yeah, because it could be set up where it goes into their own GL account and everything like that, so.
First sticker I ever bought was
They're easy to
$5 and
work
the beach
with.
attendant licked it and put it on the window. Paper.
Yeah,
Okay.
things have changed. a
Yes, they
little.
have.
All right, so let's continue on.
Okay. So completed to date, again, we have the 10 handheld ticket issuing devices. The enforcement back-end system is up and running. The customer ticket citation payment portal, all the adjudication functions, hearing requests, enforcement reports, all broken out by issuing officer, location, type. This was information that was not being collected prior to having this system. So again, we're going to have we're going to understand patterns and, different rates of issuance and locations and so forth. It's all integrated with the New York State PREED system and NLETS. So all the plates we have are in a national database, so we're able to, find every registration. And the virtual permit system, which is currently built, it's going to be actually demoed to us next week and
Hey,
training.
Can I ask the vendor, how are they paid in general? Is it a fixed rate, or is it based on the ticketing? or
They
permit
get
sold?
Yeah, they get it's the service amount on top of usually the tickets that get paid for the citation part, and they get an amount for every permit that we
For every
sell as
permit.
well. But again, it's a fee that's on top of what our
So-
permit amount is.
So we went from $40 to $50 last year. I don't think there was that much pushback, was there?
No,
But we're
no.
not proposing to increase it again, are we?
No, the resident permit is 50 this season.
Right.
But-
It was 50 last season, right?
Correct. But when you buy it online, there will be a service fee on top of it. But there was this past year as well when we sold them online.
Right. And how much is that service fee? Like $3 or something?
I think it will be
It was
$275.
two this year, two something, I recall.
All right. $275. And how many?
Oh, I'm
permits?
sorry, $225 is what we have to tack on. And then also the merchant services fee gets tacked on.
Oh, that's for the credit card processing.
Yeah.
That covers our percentage cost, but the $225,
Mm-hmm.
that goes to the vendor?
Yes. So
And
if
how many
you,
do we sell typically?
we sold about 25,000. That's for online. In person, they get $1 per permit sold. So like if we process it in our office, it's $1.
Because it still
That
has to
they
be added
get.
to their system.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And so this will be great, because then next year, even though we're still doing stickers, next year you will have reports on beach usage and exactly what the times that people are in there, the lots full. I mean, you'll have a breakdown of,
For
the-
Tiana, yes, but we won't have the
because you won't
cameras
have
at
the
the other
LPRs
ones
at the
yet.
other beaches.
So the vendor, assuming 25,000 tickets and $225 each, is getting somewhere in the neighborhood of, that's a little bit more than $50,000, so $60,000, something like that.
Yes, that's if all of them were sold online.
If all of them are sold online.
About 30%, I'd say, were sold online last season.
Okay, well, this year is getting more sold online.
Yes. I
So
would
what do they get
anticipate.
when they're not sold online?
$1.
Oh, so they get less when they
Yeah.
get sold on.
Right.
If it's physical.
All right, so the vendor isn't getting crazy amounts of money, but they also get part of the ticket.
They get part of, the tickets that are paid online. Again, it's a service fee that's tacked on top of whatever that ticket
Right.
fee is. And then same thing, they get $1 for each in-person ticket paid. They also do the notification letters sent to a person after 30 days, 60 days.
And
They
they have to put in all the equipment and maintain all the equipment. and all
Right, we get the
license plate readers,
software.
And they give us all the data.
And the hosting.
Right. Yeah.
They host the entire
Do
system.
they give us those hand scanners?
We have to pay for
We have
those.
to pay for the scanners.
Yes.
But those are talking to the internet that holds all the data in terms of who's licensed, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's some wireless community.
It's the only way it knows.
So
whether
they're
it's-
paying for the server that's managing all the data too, so, okay.
Right, they kind of work on the permits and the citation
Okay,
fees that are paid.
all right.
And then, the equipment costs.
Well, yeah, obviously you looked at the different vendors and this was the best proposal.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because they did offer all the pieces.
They offered all the
Rather,
pieces.
the other vendor was, he was gonna have to go to third parties to provide,
Right.
plugins on the
Well,
different
I'm
pieces.
imagining we're gonna see enhanced revenues because we're gonna capture a lot of people who've been parking illegally at our beaches
Yeah.
that now we're gonna get. 'Cause-
Which is the question I have. You'd said that it's all registered license plates within the state of New York. What happens with someone who is out of the state of New York but is still a legal resident?
They have that, right? That's the inlets?
Yeah,
we
that's
have
the
that. That's the
inlets.
inlets.
And
Yeah.
let's, okay.
Yeah, we have
Thanks.
that as well.
The inlets?
Yeah,
Inlets.
it's a national database of
Okay.
vehicle registrations. That passport is also.
So it's
tapped
not
into.
just the state, it's the country?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. It's clear to make it clear.
Yeah, also because, some states don't require a front plate. So, so for the license plate readers, you have to be aware of that. Sometimes cars will back in,
Right.
so, but,
So if our reader is reading a non-license plate, it registers that? A no front license plate?
no, he would have to go around and scan it by
Okay.
hand in the back.
Did you say some cars would back in?
Yeah,
Did I hear right? I'm sorry.
to try to.
Yeah, because they
avoid-
have
Try to
no front
avoid that.
license plate.
Yeah, well, then we would need a sign that say head and parking only. Like at the,
So that when you drive
At
through,
the
you
road
can-
end.
Oh, in the
Some
parking
folks-
spot.
In the
I'm not- I'm at the
spot,
entrance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thinking-
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well,
I was thinking of the
well, you
road
guys
end,
do
yeah.
this, so I'm imagining.
Can I ask you, like,
There's
so-
always a way,
and
right?
this
Well,
really
there's always
gets-
someone, though.
This is sort of looking into the future with the automated ticketing. If somebody comes in by Uber in that Uber vehicle or whatever taxi, just dropping them off,
20 minutes.
they're not gonna get a ticket they didn't really park. They're there, they left.
Yep,
20
We're
minutes.
actually recording them leaving too, is that?
yes,
So we know that they're only there for 5 minutes?
correct.
Yep. Everybody gets a 20-minute grace period.
Okay, that solves the problem.
Under the category of there's always a way, or there are those that purchase license plate covers, and I don't know what they're called because I don't do this at all, but it makes it difficult or impossible for readers to read them, and they do this for this reason. Okay, that is what it is.
The
and
state
we're-
is really cracking down on that.
Okay,
Because
those are
it's become a
illegal.
problem for them at the bridges and tunnels.
Yeah.
So they're really starting to crack down on it. They have a campaign, they're starting a campaign from what I understand.
I'm imagining they're making those things illegal, right?
Right,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're,
Anything that would obscure the reading of the license plate.
Exactly, yep.
Yeah,
Makes
well,
total
and there's
sense.
spray paint, but
Um,
Or even defacing, folks are defacing their
I've
own
seen that,
plates.
they've
They
taken
chip
the
away
paint off,
parts
yeah.
of
chip paint or
Yeah.
use
So no.
spray with clear.
Okay.
We shouldn't be giving.
We're a
this
low-level priority on this, but
But I do like the idea of the 20-minute grace period where somebody can go drop somebody off at the beach and leave.
Drop the
without-
kids off.
Yeah, exactly.
Drop the kids off, and, it frees up a parking space potentially for somebody else. And we don't want to discourage people from
Biking.
using
walking.
taxis, or certainly biking, but I think that's a nice feature.
So we still would require attendance for the walk-ins. Right?
No.
No, you can walk
Would
in,
we?
you have to pay.
This summer,
Oh, we
for
did
walk,
during COVID
well,
at one point.
Summer.
for daily permits this summer, we're still gonna need attendance there to sell daily permits.
Okay.
Oh, is that what you mean by walk-ins? The
Yeah.
daily permits?
Yeah.
People just walking in,
Yeah.
okay.
Because we only will have the app at Tiana Beach, so we'll probably pull about half the staff to work at those satellite locations. And the other half will stay at the beach locations, because now they won't be selling the full
Selling.
season permits. They'll just be selling daily permits and doing their other duties.
So we're gonna allow more daily permits this year than we did in the past, or not necessarily?
We were full 100% last year to
I know
where-
that we've only allowed dailies at certain beaches, but this is gonna give us a future where we can have dailies at more beaches.
You could do it at more road ends, potentially.
Well, even more beaches, because
Well, the,
Because if it's
we didn't
day
have
by
somebody to collect it, like Hot Dog Beach, you could have.
oh, Hot Dog, we started selling dailies last summer.
Okay. That's
Well, also
good.
get
But you
the
still have
information.
limited parking spaces.
But we don't sell dailies at what, Mecox? or-
Mecox, we don't sell them on the weekends.
Cameron.
But
Well,
we
no, I mean, it should be,
could.
it should be anywhere, because
It's
really,
usually
you drive in,
packed
you
out,
find a
though.
spot, you
With-
pay for that spot.
Some beaches, we don't allow it.
Yeah,
But I
I'm
mean, you
just saying
could
that
with
we
this
might wanna
system.
Think about that.
Well, you have to
Right.
put that
We-
system in place.
Yeah, there's certain beaches where we don't sell them on certain days, just because they're small lots and they usually fill with resident.
And we like that.
We like that.
Yeah, we wanna.
But it's reasonable to say if we increase the
So we do have other
systems,
spots
we're
for
gonna
people to
increase
go.
the cost, our cost to the vendor. Because we're talking about one pilot right now at 225, but if we increase these he's gonna have an increased overhead. I think it's gonna be passed
I'm just
along.
thinking that in the future, because we'll have this data managed, that we could make real-time decisions and say, okay, the lot's largely empty, we can take some dailies here
Yeah.
today.
Exactly.
And we have a little digital sign that goes up, dailies available today.
And I think we're
Or
gonna
you
find
could
we're
do
gonna
dailies
increase our
after
revenue.
1 PM or something like that.
And historic
should
data as
mention-
well. If
Yeah.
we see parking lots that are not full historically, we can change our policies.
I think
at
it's gonna
those
increase our
locations.
revenue. I think that's what
Chris, I
we
wanted to ask, does this change our operating hours at all? Like, the kids are usually out of there by 4 o'clock, and we get a rush of people at 4:15 that hit the parking lots. Are we managing those also?
Right now, we're gonna keep the operating hours as they have been in the past, which is to 4:30 PM. In the future, though,
Could change that. So basically, if you park there 5 o'clock,
right now, if you park at 5, you're rolling the dice, if you don't have a permit.
right.
So technically, you should be ticketed if a TCO were to come through. I don't know how, we don't have data on how much of that we're missing out on right now, because we don't,
Well,
have
that's what we're gonna learn.
have it being captured. So I do think that that's where you'll see a lot of increase, is in those like after hours, where typically there wouldn't have been an attendant there for them to buy a permit from.
Right. Now, what about like special events? Can you put into your database, let's say you have 20 people who go to Sag Main Beach on Monday nights who, under a special permit, to do something like beach drumming, whatever it might be. So those people, those license plates are in your system. They get a placard, something to put on it. Can that be automated so that those people during those hours know that they won't get a ticket?
There's a couple of different ways we've been talking about handling that. One is, for example, like with our hotel motels, is to create a group where, let's say the hotel has 10 rooms and they typically get 10 placards that are interchangeable. Instead, they would get 10 spots in the system, and they go in and they enter the license plates for that given day.
I like that.
So we could handle it that way, where it's a group that's put in, or it could be where they were talking about giving us like a code that the person would put in the app. So like like a promo code, let's say.
Right.
Or a serial number. So we were thinking about this for Tiana Activity Center, because right now we don't charge for parking when people have events there. They come through Tiana and they go to the lot and park over there. So if you're having an event there, part of the permit would probably be, okay, like, you're gonna need this parking code that you give to your guests, and they just put it in when they get there, and it will validate them.
I think that makes a lot
Right.
of sense.
Okay, so you're thinking about all that, that's important.
Yeah.
How do we charge hotels?
Hotels, we charge, they pay the non-resident permit rate per room that they could get
As many as they want.
as
though,
many
right?
as they want, up to the
And
amount
they
of
get
rooms they
something
have.
that they can put in the car, is that?
That's how we've done it in the past, and how we'll do it this summer
No, I
as
know
well.
in East Hampton, it's a lower rate. It's a different rate than either the non-resident or the resident. In East Hampton, residents are free, so.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like $150, I forget, they've changed the number so much. But you buy as many as you think you need, so if you have a 50-unit hotel, not everybody's gonna ask for one. So you gotta buy maybe 10 of them with the hopes that on the biggest day, you'll have to pass 10 of them out. So, and I think that's we can talk about it to help promote tourism. What is the right number that a hotel, because they are paying property taxes.
We
sort of
do
have-
also offer daily permits in the town of Southampton, whereas they don't in a lot of the East Hampton lots. So that's
Right.
another option for hotel guests too. It is a nice courtesy for the hotel to be able to offer that, and we could certainly talk about if you wanna,
Yeah, we could work with the hotels and.
amend the rates, but that's currently how we charge for
Right.
those.
So they could buy, let's say the Canoe Place Inn, whatever they want, let's say they wanted to buy 30 passes, so they got 50 rooms, whatever the number is, and at whatever the price we set, and then on a daily basis, they would have to go into our system and put the license plates in. and They
Right.
couldn't exceed 30 in the
Mhm.
system on a given day.
Yep,
Yeah, we could figure that out.
that's how it would be set up, yeah. They would have a grouping of how many they purchased, and they could put in whatever license plates each day that they wanna put in
Now,
there.
somebody who's, let's say, what is somebody who's renting their house, assuming they're renting it for 2 weeks, compliant with the code?
Get on that.
First 2 weeks of July, that renter wants to go to the beach, can they, right now, the only choice would be to buy the daily,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that would only allow you at those beaches that we allow daily passes to.
Yeah, at the beach that you purchase it at is
Right.
is where we
I
allow for
wonder
it
if we
now.
could do something similar there too, where you could go online and buy a 2-week pass or something like that.
Yeah, we haven't. I mean, those are all options that we'll have now, but we haven't gotten that far into thinking about offering those different time frames, different times of the
We
day.
still need the data to make these decisions.
Yeah, so those
Right.
are all possibilities.
It's sort of like a
though.
hybrid thing, because the daily pass is expensive, but, a 2-week pass might be, we might do really well financially.
Yeah, it's finding that happy medium because I agree that we might want to look at things like that. For example, in East Hampton Village, they sell non-resident permits for a high rate. They don't really sell daily permits, so therefore they end up selling a lot more of those non-resident permits, and they get a lot of the revenue right out the gate, whereas we're selling 15,000 dailies a year at $30. So.
Those folks who are coming here for 2 weeks are on vacation.
Yeah. they're gonna go
They'll
to
pay the
beach every day.
non-resident rate.
But they.
But that's a conversation for another
Well,
time.
Right.
So, but when you're saying the non-resident rate, you're saying you're here for only 2 weeks, you're gonna pay for the entire season the non-resident rate of whatever, 300,
They can come back.
$400. So
Or
they're all
daily rates.
with this technology, we could potentially produce a shorter term type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah,
And
if
the
I was
shoulder
just
season
staying,
But that's
also.
for
if I'm
another
just
time,
staying
I
2 weeks,
suppose.
I don't know that I'm gonna pay $400 for that seasonal thing. I might take Ubers every day.
Well,
So you-
we're
There you
still
go.
in phase one, and we
And
still
you've
need
left
to
us
fine with
evaluate.
It would be
that.
cheaper to
Yeah,
buy a
right,
daily every
exactly.
Yeah,
day.
but
Another
then you
spot
sort
for-
of discourage tourism at the same time, and hurt your
Haven't
homeowner's
had that
ability to
problem.
rent for that code compliant period. So I think it's worth looking at, because the technology allows you to do it. And we might end up
But the
making
point I'm trying to make
significantly
is
more
that the
revenue.
data will sort of direct you on how to get there.
We don't want to keep the year-round people out either, both all these exceptions.
Right, well, they get the $50 pass.
But the more exceptions we make, the 2 weeks, a month, whatever, we're just adding more people on top of it, where they might only come for a couple days.
Well,
So
so,
it'll be for a couple days in those 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, that's why we want to collect this data, so we know.
They might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is all
if you had a-
codified.
If you had a 2-week
This is in our code, right, Kristen?
permit.
I mean, what we're discussing here now would require a code change as far as?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
What we have for this season, there won't need to be code
Right.
changes. But yeah, that's another thing that in the future, we may have to start looking at amending the code if we're gonna be changing the timeframes when permits are required and the times of the days that they're required.
Yeah, we had during COVID, I think we did expand the required parking permit time. It used to be like Memorial Day through Labor Day, and then we made it
At certain locations
April
you
to
did.
Columbus Day or something, you know.
In, at certain road ends, you changed
Right.
it. The ones that were getting like inundated during that time. And
Right, and this is gonna be really, it's gonna make it really easy for the police to enforce at road ends. Because those,
Yeah.
you know, we did talk at one point about a road end permit, but we haven't done that, right? It's the same permit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like a seasonal, non-resident road end thing. But right now, we charge them what, for, as if they use the beaches as well.
Right.
Well, you don't have readers at road ends, so you're still reliant on the number of TCOs that are in the area.
But we could create that too, as some people really just want to go fishing at the road ends. We don't really provide any services to them the way we do at the beaches, where
Yeah, and you'd have to
you might be
examine
able to
that.
have a way to, when you go on, where you register that I don't want the beaches, I just want road ends, and
I
to
would-
reduce.
I wouldn't do that because you're just gonna have more people at those road end beaches.
And the cost of the system
Yeah.
may outweigh the cost of
The
the
trustees
revenue.
already
Just a
offer,
few
the
people.
trustees
Further away, they
offer a
don't have
permit
to-
on their road ends for free, I think.
Yeah.
So you
And-
can get a parking permit and park on a trustee now road end for
In
free.
the road
residents.
ends, you can park, but you
Residents.
have
For
to.
residents.
You can be a non-resident with no permit, and if you park more than like 1,000 feet away or something, you can
Yeah,
park. So, I don't know, it's not what
You
you
have
could
can
some
always-
communities that wanna remove those restrictions that were put in place during COVID at the road
Yeah,
ends.
and the more restrictions you put,
Yeah.
the more people are pulling on the beach instead of parking in the parking places.
well,
so.
another thing is this is just for parking at the beach. Anybody can get dropped off at a beach, can ride a bike, can walk in, so the access is always there. This is just speaking to parking at these locations.
Right. Yeah, we had some issues with people in certain communities that didn't want to pay the higher price to park at the road end where they always have parked historically, and don't want to use the beaches, but if they're year-round residents, it's really not a high price, $50. It's that $300 or $400 thing, the non-resident one, that's the issue.
Well, I mean, the whole purpose of this was so that we would have a lot more flexibility in how we generate revenue, where we generate it, when we generate it, who we generate it, all of that. And that's, we're still in phase one, I just want to stress that. But the
Yeah.
whole point of this was that we would have this, what we're talking about now, have happen, but it's going to be a little while until that occurs. There's a lot of data collection, and you have to compare revenue, points, sourcing, all that.
Well, it creates a lot of possibilities
Yeah.
for us, because,
And this has proved to be really good, this
you know, at that
first
entry
phase.
point, that person can put in more specifically what they want, and we can curtail the prices based on that in the future. I'm not
Yeah.
saying we do it now, but it's,
Yeah, this is gonna be, a phased approach for sure, because it's gonna take time to get through each piece of this, and also just making the public aware, getting all the equipment in place. So, I think we're moving at a good pace, but it will take a
Do
few
we-
years to see the full implementation.
Do we currently have any beaches in the town where you do not need a permit to park during the season?
Road, the county parking lot by Road H.
But no town, but no,
Um,
yeah, there's Road G in the village.
Trout
There's
pond.
definitely road ends.
Trout pond.
Well, I'm talking about like ocean beaches.
Oh, no ocean beaches.
no ocean. What about
No.
the,
Because even the village has one ocean beach that
Do-
Road G, I think you could park out without a
I
permit,
don't
which
think
is,
what's
there's
the little
one.
it's
beach
nice.
that we have, in Hampton Bays between Hot Dog Beach and
Sandbar.
Sandbar Beach, we require town
Yeah.
permits there. Um,
Yeah, I don't think we have any Ocean Beach locations that don't require a parking permit.
So I think it is nice the village does have one beach, where, I mean, you gotta get there early, but if you can go out.
Do you need a trustee permit for it?
Not
No,
for a
nothing.
Are you gonna be able to manage the arrangement with the Village of Sag Harbor in terms of Long Beach? We're issuing sort of a special permit that allows you to go to
Yeah.
like 3 beaches.
Yeah, we already have it getting built into the system for this year.
Okay. Where the East Hampton folks are able to buy that, and I guess the village, I forget how we did it, the village
It's,
paid us some money.
Sag Harbor Village residents that live in the town of East Hampton could get what we call the Long Beach permit, which is the same as our resident rate, and that gives them access to Long Beach, Sag, Maine, Mecox, and Scott Cameron.
Okay, but we're not charging the village then for that, or we are? I don't think we are.
I'm not
We
sure.
did charge it,
First
2
year we
years
did.
ago, they paid $10,000. They did not this year, from what I understand.
But I think we didn't, the
And-
first year, we didn't charge the residents, they paid nothing for that, or maybe they did, I don't remember.
The
think we
village
have-
gave
we have more to
us
go through,
a
yeah.
payment of $10,000
Right.
Two
to
years.
defray towards
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Last summer, I inquired about it, but I wasn't sure where it ended
That's
up.
fine. I think, but the individuals paid the $50.
Yes,
Right.
they paid our resident rate, the $50, and then if they wanted a non-resident permit, they got it was less whatever the resident rate was that year. So last summer it would have been $350. They get a discounted
We discounted
permit.
by that
Yeah.
amount, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed to work out, right? I don't know how many you sold, but.
We sold, probably, I have the information, but probably about 175 of the Long Beach permits.
Right. And
And
they probably
then the summer
most-
before, it was a lot more. I think that our staff last season wasn't as adept at determining who lived on the East Hampton side of Sag Harbor and who lived on the Southampton side. So probably some of those people just ended up getting resident permits.
Oh, maybe. But the East Hampton folks aren't supposed to get resident permits.
No, they're supposed to get the Long Beach
Long
permit.
Beach, which includes Scott Cameron and Mecox and Sagmate.
Yes. Yeah, we lost some key staff there last summer, and the girls we had lived in the village, and they knew, exactly what streets were in what jurisdiction, but
Okay.
some of the people probably ended up with a
All right,
different
so-
other one.
I mean, it sounds like we're gonna have a lot of abilities through the new system to put the parameters in that match what we've been doing, which is good.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to speak about some of the assessments from
Oh, yeah,
what has been put in
we
place
got-
this year.
We got more pages.
Yeah, we'll try to move quickly.
Probably
Yeah.
up to phase 3
We're getting
already.
hungry here, so hurry.
Just, I could quickly go through these. Sergeant Schottenhamel, who's going to be here today, but he couldn't make it at the last minute, but he reports that they definitely have increased efficiency, ticket issuance, time savings. Him and his guys really love the new ticket issuing devices. I mean, basically, they could just scan the registration and all the information just loads right into the ticket. No more, writing it all out. And so they're writing more tickets, they're writing them faster. He's looking to add the bay constables, fire marshals, and code enforcement officers. The adjudication functions are all up and running. The folks are paying their citations through the customer portal. 75% of citations are being paid in that fashion. He says that guilty pleas are up and ticket appeals are down, which is likely due to photo evidence. So if you log into the system and enter your ticket number, it shows a picture of your vehicle and the violation. So as a result,
pretty
we're
hard
getting many guilty pleas, rather than appeals. And that's also resulting in a labor savings on the justice court side. There's less burden on the justice court side as a result. So we're seeing impacts almost immediately from the program. The justice court itself has reported a steeper learning curve than originally anticipated, and that they're still working out some bugs. So they are still trying to work out a few details with hearing schedulings and things like that. But they're getting assistance from the vendor. The permit, the digital permit system has been pretty much complete. It's going to be demoed next week, and it will be live in 2023 for permit sales. Again, we're going to continue to issue physical stickers in 2023, and assuming a successful test next year, we're going to go without a net in 2024, and no more stickers. So phase two, this is what we're looking at. We pretty much talked about all this. You know, this is what we're doing next year. It's going to be online customer portal, virtual permit sales. The 4 locations are listed here: 6 Newtown Road, Conscious Point Park, Bridgehampton Senior Center, and you know, we were thinking of some location in the western part of the town, but you know, we don't have anything yet.
I think we're in a good spot with that, but I don't want to speak too prematurely or put
Okay.
anyone on the spot, so.
And again, at Tiana Beach, that's going to be pretty much, there's going to be no booth attendant at Tiana Beach this year.
Well, we will have people there, but they'll just be there for informational purposes and
Okay.
to do their other duties there, but they won't be selling anything.
Okay. So that's going to be your daily is going to be pay by app only, and the fixed readers are going to check for, you know, you're authorized, whether your plate is authorized to be in the lot. Again, if there are a lot of red flags after 20 minutes, you go on the red flag list, and they notice that there's, you know, a dozen or so cars that are unauthorized, then Carl can dispatch one of his guys. That's what they call intelligent enforcement. So that's what we're looking at next year. No changes to daily pass sales at the other big beaches, or seasonal stickers at the other big beaches.
And there'll be signage for everything, not just the QR code to scan, there'll be actual signage on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other part next year is deployment of 2 vehicle-mounted LPR units. So we're going to have 2 cars with the vehicle-mounted cameras that are going to be checking the road ends and other locations. And you know, we're going to be testing to you know, make sure the communications are good. You know, whether there are any dead spots that we have to be concerned about. All the communications, the bandwidth, all that is going to be tested, and we'll be here next year telling you the results of the 2023 program. We are exploring the inclusion of trustee permits into this system, as well as the waste management functions, which we discussed the last time we were here. We might be able to use some of this technology for, and the program.
That's something we were asked initially was, at the time you guys were exploring permits for waste management, and this can go into this system as well.
Have you been talking with Tom Houghton at all yet, or?
I haven't recently,
Okay.
but if that was the way you guys were still wanting to go with that, we could do an LPR type system there as well.
Okay.
Yep. And then for phase 3, as it's envisioned today, would be that there would be no physical permits issued whatsoever. This would be 2024. Again, no physical daily permits issued. There would be at all the beaches, it would be pay by app 2 years from now. And then we would have the pilot program at Tiana, where rather than using intelligent enforcement to enforce the lot, if a car leaves the lot without paying, they would be mailed an invoice in the mail. So that would eliminate the need to send enforcement vehicles into the lot altogether.
Right.
So that's
That's
where we're heading. That
big
would,
goal.
that would be the end point if we
Yeah.
could get there. It's,
We would be pretty much at the forefront of that type of system though, in this type of application, so it's a big
I'm okay with that.
undertaking.
As long as there's 20-minute grace period, you
Yeah.
know, because I think there's gonna be some people in this town who'll be like,
Take it as a challenge.
I want to get right to the beach, forget about the app, and I'll pay, you know.
Well, it does give that capability too, yeah, I don't wanna deal with the app, I'll just wait for my invoice, like Easy Pass, you
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
I didn't have an Easy Pass, I went through the toll, I got my letter, and I paid
Yeah.
it.
And they can write their check.
Exactly. And that's okay, I think.
But the way that it works is you enter the invoice number, you go online, you enter the invoice number, you know. That's the way the majority
You
of
want
the
them to pay a
payments will
premium
be
if they
issued.
don't do the app, they should pay an extra certain amount, and it should not just go to the vendor, it should go some to us too,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I like that idea of an incentive for paying online. Keep it
We're
all
going to see,
streamlined.
have to see what the numbers show, because I wouldn't want folks who don't buy tickets and just get a daily ticket that way to shut out our residents.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. You know. But if
This is
our
gotta be-
residents can't get parking spaces, we're
True.
unhappy. They're the
Yeah.
ones that pay the taxes, they're the ones that pay, you know,
And we had
for
talked
most
about
of our
that too, I
parks.
think, about if it was a lot that doesn't allow
Yeah.
for daily permits,
Yeah,
how we're gonna
right.
handle that.
Right.
I was just thinking about that too.
Yeah.
So somebody actually parked for the day, they get an automatic ticket, but they wouldn't have been able to buy a daily pass,
It's gonna be a higher fee.
They would have to get a much higher fee.
much higher fee,
Yeah, where it's not worth the cost of.
because it wasn't available what they got.
Yeah, well, that's what we have to,
Yeah.
you know, I keep saying that, but it's, the data here is really critical to how we proceed.
Right, we have to figure that out, because they shouldn't have to pay for the seasonal pass, but there should be something significantly higher than the daily pass.
Yeah,
Um,
we would want to deter them from
Deter it,
just
yeah.
paying the ticket.
So maybe like $100 on top of the normal daily pass fee,
Yeah,
something like that. All right, we can talk about that. When we get there, right now, we're not there.
we're not there just yet, but
Right now,
I'm
it's
sure it will
only
come quickly.
Tayano, and Tayana does allow for dailies, so.
yeah, that's why Tiana was the most logical. It's the biggest lot. We really never stop selling dailies there, so it's a good place to start.
Okay.
They do have geofencing features where you have to be within the limits of the geofence, which would basically be the perimeter of the lot, so that you can only purchase your parking if you're within that perimeter. Now, if you want to limit it to a number of daily sales per day, you could do that as well. So you could say, once you hit, 50 daily sales at a particular location within
Right.
that geofence, you don't issue any more.
Oh, that's great.
You won't even be able to purchase it on the app.
But we'd have to have some kind of digital signage that lights up, no more dailies today.
They
Dailies
would
sold
see it
out.
on the app.
Yeah.
Okay, dailies not available.
There's actually, I think it's BP Pulse does this. They're the ones that do this containerized charging for bus systems in Anaheim, and they use the geofence exactly for that reason.
Right.
I would wanna
Because
know
they're
pulling it
adjacent
up
to beaches, and so the it's
I
pretty
wanna-
interesting.
Yeah, they would
know.
have to look in the app ahead of time, probably.
Yeah, I want to
just
know if there's like a digital sign that lights up, daily pass is sold out. That would help. Then I just gotta turn around and leave, rather than parking. Even though I see all these empty spaces, I'm gonna park and then go into my app, and then the app's gonna say, yep, can't get a daily pass. I would rather have been told that when I was driving it.
Yeah, we'll always have some level of staffing at the beaches, so even if it's a sandwich board that they put out
Yeah, that's fine.
or something
Well,
like
whatever
that.
it is. No more dailies. But it would be great to have it integrated where it automatically lit up when that was exceeded. You know. We can talk about it.
Yeah, that could be possible.
Does Tiana sell out a lot?
No.
That's why we selected that for the,
That's a big park.
Would this apply to the parking across the street from Diana too?
Mm-hmm.
At the Bay side?
Yep. Anywhere that's parking by permit.
What about the hours? Does it stop at 5, or the enforcement, like, somebody come in there free at 7 o'clock? Or it's gonna be 6?
After 6, right?
Well, permits are required till 9 PM at the major beaches. So it would be put in how it's currently written in the code.
Okay.
And this
And after 9, they're
for the
closed.
After
marina-
9, it's closed unless you have a facility use permit.
Okay.
So that's
The
gonna be-
staff for the marine education program,
go
they
there
would
on a
get the
Wednesday.
license plate.
Yeah, we would probably give
Yeah,
them a
it's gonna have
group
two
and
cars.
they
They
put
have
it
parking
in,
lot.
or
Somebody's gonna get-
again,
they're gonna
you
get
know,
it.
maybe in that circumstance,
7 o'clock.
Well, you
they
have the
have some
SPAT
kind of
program
placard, but the
there, too.
TCO would be aware of it or something like
You have the
that.
SPAT program.
Well, don't they have to get
They,
seasonal license?
they
Yeah,
do
they
get
do,
their
right.
permits. Yeah, we already require it, unless they're getting something through Cornell.
Right.
All right, but these are all good questions. So are we at the end?
That's it, we did, just the last slide is just the budget, just to, you know, update you on, the original appropriation was 500,000. In 2022, we expended 85,000 of that, and in 2023, the number is expected to be 157, because that's when we're gonna be putting the mobile license plate readers out there, the vehicles, so.
That includes the purchase of the 2 vehicles as well.
Yes.
The tough books that go in the vehicles, that's all stuff that we keep.
So we would multiply these numbers by the number of facilities, right? So if we go to increase that, can we extrapolate that from this?
The,
I don't think we can.
the in-lane cameras, you probably could.
Yes.
So that would get multiplied by,
But whether there would be a sliding fee on top of that to the vendor themselves, that I'd like to know that.
we're locked in with this fee for. how
2
many-
years.
2 years
Yeah.
is the current fees that they're getting is for the next 2 years.
But I think when we talk to them, let's find out if there's, you know, is it a flat fee? Does it stay the same if we expand this program, you know, to a larger group of beaches?
If anything, yeah, I would say I
Yeah,
would want
I
it to
just
be
don't know.
lower if they see a lot of volume.
Yeah. I mean, we're helping them, they're helping us, but
Oh,
let's
and
see what.
The
you know.
daily app, if people buy a daily, they get $1 for that passport.
In the 22 budget was level G. You guys not in the budget? Was that separate thing?
That was
yeah,
that wasn't in the capital budget.
Okay.
So this year,
That's
if
a
you go to a
consulting
beach
contract.
and you've done your
Yes.
thing online and you haven't gotten your permit yet, you'll still get a ticket if you don't have a physical permit on your car.
That's something I'll have to talk to Carl about, if he scans the plate and the plate's in the system already, but they don't
Because I
have
want
the
like,
physical
if
permit
you could
yet.
go to like a drive-up beach and there's a QR code that you could scan and buy your permit, you know what I mean?
You're talking about your full season permit? The
Yeah.
problem with that is we're still validating residency on all of those permits. So we still have to have a human look and approve it.
Okay.
It's not automatic. That would be wonderful, but what's that?
No, a natural person, it's just something came up the other day. Not a corporation. All right, so we're good, everybody's good?
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, thank you.
Jerry.
This is great.
I know it's a lot of information.
Feedback's been good too, so.
We take in a lot of.
At the end of a long morning.
Thanks, Jerry, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chris, what does
Thanks,
Brookhaven?
Kristen.
Brookhaven uses Passport
Yeah.
for their back end. They
Yeah.
use Civic Optimize on their front end.
Okay.
We're gonna be using Passport on front end. back end.
All right,
Yeah,
we're gonna
yeah,
move
really
along,
well.
guys. We've got just updates next. So I guess I will start. So today, 4 o'clock is the last series, beginning of the last series of focus groups that I've been having in Hampton Bays. Been getting about 10 people per focus group. I do a 1-hour session. 3 of them, 1 at 4, 1 at 5, 1 at 6. And this is the 4th of those. I did, I think, 2 last month and 2 this month. We'll see if we need to do any more, but we've had good attendance so far, and they've been constructive. So that will happen today at the senior center in that public safety room. The work sessions for December 22 and December 29th are canceled. We will, on December 22nd, we'll be having a special town board meeting at 10 a.m. That was the board meeting that had been scheduled for 12/27. That's getting canceled, and we're moving that as a special meeting to the 22nd. And I will not be here for that, so Frank Sapone will chair that meeting. The organizational meeting next year will be scheduled for Wednesday, January 4th. So hopefully all of you are back. If you have any kind of New Year's plans, vacation plans, that'll be at 11 a.m. on January 4th of next year. And then the last update, the Division of Public Safety has assembled tips for residents to be aware of during winter weather events. The information can be found on the town's website, www.southamptontowny.gov. Well, one of the, maybe two other things I'll mention. One is I have some individuals, I think Rick, you'll be interested in particular in this, but others as well. We had set aside some land, if you recall, for a pool at Red Creek Park. And then we switched it over to McGee. And I have some people who are interested in replicating the SYS model in the Hampton Bays area. And I'm thinking that that land that we had sort of slated for that pool to do an indoor athletic facility, indoor track, multi-purpose field, maybe some gymnastics rooms and things like that. Maybe a little smaller than the SYS building, but privately fundraised. That same idea. So I mentioned it to Kristen. I think it's worth exploring. It could be an exciting addition to Red Creek Park and a great amenity. I know SYS gets a lot of people west of the canal go to SYS. So it might help reduce traffic as well and provide a amenity a little bit closer, an indoor amenity. I know we're talking about the Spionk Athletic Facility, but that's not going to be an indoor facility. This would be an indoor facility. So I just want the board to think about that a little bit. And then in terms of CPF, I know we closed on Burden, and we're going to at some point get Chris LaGuardia in here to start talking about the plan for the Burden Park. We'll have to figure out what we're going to call it. Probably not going to call it the Burden Park, but we closed on Methodist, I think,
Yes.
right?
Yes, we did.
And not Seven Seas yet?
Not 7 Seas yet.
Not Seven Seas.
1040 was Methodist Point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
That
so
1040 we-
1140 was.
1140 is 7 Seas, yeah. We're just going through the environmental review on that.
Okay, so, because I've been asked about whether we own Seven Seas yet, so the answer is not yet.
No. We're in contract, but we haven't. We did
Okay.
it. We're undertaking the phase 1 environmental review as we speak.
Okay, any other big?
We may close before the end of the year. It's still a
Okay,
chance.
well, I'll let you guys know when that closing occurs.
The adjoining piece to Burden, we may close this year too, that Pasco.
Oh, that small triangle?
That could
Okay.
happen this year.
That would be positive as well, so, okay, that's all I have. Which end wants to start? Tommy John, you want to go?
Sure, real quickly, we had a volunteer event on Long Beach. Cornell Cooperative was expecting about 8 volunteers. We had 45.
Wow.
So,
That's
yeah,
like
it was, right,
beach-
37 degrees, 45 volunteers.
Beach grass
So-
planting, is that what that was?
Yeah, beach grass planting in some of the places near the road. So, hardy souls out there. And that's really it, except to shop locally on Main Street with our local vendors and merchants.
So you were so successful that we are inquiring about doing a restoration project at East Landing also.
Awesome.
That's great.
Right, we had talked about that. There's
Inspirational,
some,
Tommy John.
well, and the Noyak Civic Council, really,
That's
they
good.
do a good job getting the word out.
John, you want to go?
No, thanks.
Rick?
I'm good.
The only other thing I'll mention is the polar bear plunge for Heart of the Hamptons, which was a lot of fun, but boy, frigid. But there was a lot of people there, and a few crazy people jumped in the water. I was one of them. But it's really for a good cause, and it's not as bad as you might think it is. But those are really fun events if you've never done one. And the Heart of the Hamptons does such a good job in terms of dealing with food insecurity and other needs of folks who economically are struggling. So, all right. And then, of course, I won't be here next week, so I'll use this as one more opportunity to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and all of that. All right, anyone else? All right, we do have executive session items. So we have personnel to discuss, and we also have CPF acquisition, and I will assume confidential legal advice as well. So I'll make a motion to go into, to close our work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.